Order à l'ordre. The commission is reconvened. La commission reprend.
Hey, good afternoon. Hey, we have another witness, counsel. Thank you.
Commissioner. It's Frank Au, Senior Counsel for the Commission. Our next witness is Chief Superintendent Pardy.
Superintendent, will you swear on a religious document or do you wish to affirm?
I'll swear.
For the record, please state your full name and spell it out.
CARSON PARDY, surname Pardy, P-A-R-D-Y.
Do you solemnly affirm that the evidence to be...
I think he said he'd swear.
Yes.
Oh, apologies. You'd like to swear on a religious document?
Sorry?
Would you like to swear on a religious document or affirm?
I'll swear.
Okay.
On a religious document?
Sure.
The Bible?
Bible's good.
Okay.
Do you swear that the evidence to be given by you to this commission shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Please have a seat. Chief Superintendent Pardy, you remember attending an interview, well, actually 2 interviews with me and my commission colleagues in the summer?
I do, sir.
And after the interviews, we provided you with an interview summary.
You did?
May I call up the document number WTS 6033? So, Chief Pardy, this is the summary that we've sent you for review.
It was the version of it, yes.
Right. This is the version that you approved.
Correct.
And do you adopt its content in its
Yes.
entirety? Are there any changes or corrections you'd like to make?
I think, like all documents, context is important, but I'm sure that will come out in evidence.
That's right. That's right. Okay. Now, Chief Superintendent Pardy, I understand that you recently retired after serving more than 30 years with the OPP.
36 and a half years, sir. I started my policing career in '86. I left active duty in July 15th, but I'm officially retired now for 3 weeks.
Only 3 weeks.
Only 3 weeks.
Congratulations. Now, you were a former critical incident commander.
Yes, sir.
And you have, throughout your career, worked for many years in the National Capital Region on major events.
Well, I spent 28 years of my OPP career. Six of the years was with the RCMP in New Brunswick, but my 30-year OPP career, 28 of it was spent in Eastern Ontario in various roles, and the latter part, the last 12 years of my career was in a senior leadership role as a superintendent, and I did a lot of work in the National Capital Region with major events, presidential visits, North American Leader Summits, Canada Day events, et cetera, yes.
And in the course of your career, have you collaborated frequently with members of the Ottawa Police Service?
Yes, sir.
And what do you know of their reputation in terms of managing or responding to large-scale events like protests and demonstrations?
First class.
First class.
First class.
Now, are you aware of any changes within the OPS in recent years that might affect their ability to respond to these kinds of events?
Well, certainly upon my arrival in with the integrated planning team, I asked the question, like, what's going on? What happened to you guys? And certainly the pandemic has had an impact, retirements, people moved on, lack of major events to keeping those skills honed when people move on. Emergency readiness, emergency preparedness is much like crime prevention. Nobody wants to pay for it when nothing's happened. And that's across all sectors. But certainly, there's been a lull, perhaps since about 2016, with the massive large-scale events that they've had in Ottawa. So it's just been considerable passage of time that there hasn't been anything major. But yet Ottawa is renowned for almost daily protests of some sort.
So I'm going to take you back now to the events back in January, February. I understand that in January of this year, you were the commander of the OPP Northeast region, right?
That's correct, sir.
And then in early February, you were asked to lead the integrated planning group to assist the Ottawa Police Service.
That's correct.
So let's talk about the specific assignment, your lead role with the planning group, the integrated planning group. When were you asked to take that on?
It was the evening of February 7th. I received a telephone call from my supervisor, who is Deputy Commissioner Chris Harkins, asking advising that they were putting together a team to go to Ottawa to assist Ottawa, and asked if I would be interested in leading that team. He felt that I was a good fit for it with my background, and he gave me 10 seconds to say I didn't want to do it. I accepted the assignment, and that very night packed a bag and headed to Aurelia for a briefing the following morning.
And the following morning, what time was the briefing?
I believe it was about 9 a.m. In the commissioner's office.
Who attended?
Commissioner Creek was there, Deputy Commissioner Harkins, Superintendent Mike McDonnell was present. Superintendent Craig Abrams was on video link. I believe perhaps the commissioner's executive officer may have been present as well, but I don't particularly recall.
Right. And we've just this morning heard from Superintendent Abrams. Now, could we call up the witness will say number OPP 50792, please? Now, Chief Pardy, we have the Commission has received a will say. It's going to be shown on the screen. I just wanted to ask you, do you recall when this will say was first prepared?
But it was started while I was still in Ottawa.
When in Ottawa?
During the month of February. My supervisor, Deputy Commissioner Harkins, had suggested that, start putting my mind to developing or preparing a will state for the events leading up to and to the conclusion in Ottawa. I started it with high intentions of catching up and keeping it live, but within a few hours, my schedule was overtaken, and so I had maybe one page done while I was in Ottawa, and I completed it when I went back to my regular duties in North Bay.
And when did you complete it?
First week of March.
Okay. Now, tell us about the nature of your assignment. What was the mandate?
Well, the mandate was to provide Ottawa Police support. I was given a broad range to ask for anything I needed. I received from start of the deployment to the conclusion of deployment that type of support from not just my organization, because I was an OPP officer, but leading a team, an integrated team from multiple organizations. So it wasn't just OPP. It wasn't about the OPP. But I was given incredible support to ensure that we got what we needed, understanding the complexities of the events in Ottawa and the evolving events that are happening both provincially and nationally.
Right. So a moment ago, you were starting to tell us about this 9 a.m. briefing.
Yes.
Involving, among others, Commissioner Creek of the OPP. Tell us about that briefing. What was discussed?
Well, I got an overview from Superintendent Abrams as to the state of the union in Ottawa, that the concern was there wasn't a plan. They were asking for a lot of resources, but there was no concrete plan in terms of how those resources were going to be utilized. There was dysfunction. There was a loss of confidence and faith being displayed by the public. The narrative in the media was certainly slanted. there was no, in terms of the protest and by the protesters. And generally, it was a crisis in Ottawa.
Now, you mentioned earlier that the purpose was to support.
One of my most common phrases that I uttered throughout my time is in Ottawa with their senior executive, their officers, is we're here to help.
Mm-hmm.
And
what kind of help?
Whatever they need. But, we were there to help build and complement any plans and direction that they had. There was never an intent, and this was explicit in my assignment. We were not going to Ottawa to take over command and control of the event. We were going there to support them. Certainly there was a goal to integrate or unify commands. This is an event that was clearly now beyond the capability of one single organization just by its size and the need for resources. It stretched well beyond what Ottawa Police themselves could provide, which in my world, that's generally the kickoff for developing like a unified or an integrated command with others. Mm-hmm. That was the focus, to get there to have a team of dedicated people, of which I only knew one of the people that were assigned to me. I was going to be meeting these people that evening when I arrived. I was given a contact with the Ottawa Police, and later that morning, I got in my vehicle and I started making my way and spent the next 4 hours on the phone. Right.
So you were in Orillia at 9 a.m., and by 5:35 that afternoon, you were in a meeting with the members of the OPS, right?
That's correct.
Who did you meet with at that 5:35 p.m. meeting?
Well, I know I had someone taking minutes for that meeting. I know Deputy Chief Trish Ferguson, who I'd known previously, was at the meeting. Superintendent Patterson. There was a number of other folks with them, both on conference and video link. I know that initially, even in my own minutes, it reflected that Chief Slowly was present at the meeting because that was on the invite, but he did not make that meeting due to emergency family
It was delayed,
issue.
right?
I don't recall him joining. The minutes don't reflect any comments or whatsoever from the chief. My recollection is he did not join the meeting at all.
All right. Now, we heard from Deputy Chief Ferguson from the OPS yesterday. I believe she said that the former chief was delayed, but he did join by teleconference or some other means of remote communication.
And that is very possible. As I said, I reviewed the minutes from the meeting. When you look at all the minutes that we took throughout the event, it's very clear, in my humble opinion, who's speaking. There was certainly no indication from those minutes that he was there, but it's very possible that he did join.
Right. Now, if we scroll down, this will say to the next page. Right. So the first dark bullet, planning team held its first meeting at 17:35 hours from RCMP headquarters with the OPS. All OPS were on video or conference call. Also note that counsel for the OPS, Christiane Hunnod, was present. Do you recall her being present by video conference?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay. Now, let's talk about what was discussed at that meeting. Tell us what happened.
We started the meeting by just doing introductions of those that were available from my team. My team are still not all in Ottawa. They were still arriving. But we did have Inspector Tim Skinner from the York Region Police. One of my planners from our emergency unit in Orillia, Brad Taylor, was present. Superintendent Phil Liu from the RCMP, and Sergeant, now Staff Sergeant Darwin Tetrell from the RCMP as well, was present. we stated our objective. We're there to help. What do you need? We need a plan. Let's start building on. We're there to building on what your objectives are. And they proceeded to give us a broad overview of their concept of operations for the occupation. And it was just that. It was a concept of operations. We had lots of questions. We received an update from Superintendent Patterson, and he was the event commander at that time, about things that were on the horizon with some potential arrests and some strategic take-backs, if you will, in the downtown core. Listening intently just to find out. Our goal, start to finish in the meeting, is to learn as much as we possibly could. You can only help when you have a true understanding for what the needs are, and to understand those needs. And we left that meeting with a commitment from Ottawa Police that they would provide the plans to us. We asked for e-versions. Whatever version they could get to us would be very helpful, so that we could see what they have on paper in terms of their plan, and then what we would reasonably need to do to complement that plan. Also, it was critical for us to have access to them, the Ottawa Police. We're there to work with them to get through this. So we wanted an established liaison who had the authority to access and provide the information that we would need.
Was there any discussion at that meeting about the nature of integration between the OPS and the group that you're bringing?
It was raised by me at that meeting if they would consider integration or a unified command, because there's inherent benefits with it. From my experience, just about all of my major events that I've been involved, what we ended up having here in Ottawa with an integrated command has been my experience.
Right.
Whether it's a presidential visit, you still have the police of jurisdiction who have the lead, or the RCMP because of their IPP responsibilities or internationally protected persons responsibilities under legislation. But when you call on multiple organizations to participate, they bring their command structure, you inject your advice to them, you work as a team. Ultimately, someone is leading that and makes the final call. But as an integrated team, you're all on the same page. You're not working in silos. You're working collectively with the same objectives and goals.
Let's talk about the members of this team that you were assembling and bringing to Ottawa. It's called Integrated Planning Cell or Integrated Planning Group.
They call it that was the assignment, to create this integrated planning cell. We quickly deviated from the word cell and just called it our integrated planning group.
Okay.
Yes, I was provided with planners from Toronto Police Service, two planners, Sergeant Arlene Duffy and Constable Isabel Etier. Their background and their credentials were impressive in terms of emergency planning. I had Inspector Tim Skinner, who I already mentioned, from York Region Police. His background is in public order maintenance and command and control. Again, a wealth of knowledge. I had Tom Warfield from the Peel Regional Police Service. Tom came to us with a background in case management to ensure that we were capturing to the best that we could in a very kinetic and dynamic environment as much of the information, versions, and whatnot as we went forward. We had Brad Taylor, a planner extraordinaire from the OPP. Brad is a civilian member, but his expertise is in emergency planning. Rely heavily on Brad for his expertise. Then, of course, we had the two RCMP officers, Phil Liu, who became my right arm throughout the event. Phil's background was in Major Incident Command, national standards, had an extensive background in training and developing and mentoring people in the Incident Command world. And Darwin Tetral, who to this day has impressed me incredibly with his leadership in Public Order Command.
Right.
He's renowned nationally and connected internationally as it relates to public order maintenance.
Right. So yesterday, when we spoke to Deputy Chief Ferguson testified, and she explained the process of developing a plan, an operational plan. She referred to subject matter experts. So this group of people that you're bringing to Ottawa, are these subject matter experts then in the various areas?
Yes, sir. In fact, I would say that I was the only one that wasn't a subject matter expert.
All right.
I was just brought there to bring this team together and get them working and lead our way through this.
Right. Now, we've heard from some witnesses about the importance of operational plans, and I just want your view on what are the components, the key components of a good operational plan.
Well, the key components, have the line with your objectives and your goals and and that drives your strategies in terms of what that operation is meant to entail. Certainly, you need to have a clear understanding in creating a mission for the event. The mission statement is something that in every event that I've ever been involved in, whether it was a peaceful event or not, is something that is critical that your members, your employees, your officers on the ground, everybody is in line with the mission of the plan. From there, commander's objectives, and then what are we looking to achieve with this plan, and then every single aspect. So if it's a public order issue, you would need the key aspect there is the public order consult, and a good idea. Okay, what is the nature and scope of the event, and what kind of public order plan would we need to inject with it? You need crime, you need victims, you need key things like messaging, communication, logistics is key. In fact, major events from a policing perspective, when we debrief, often are successful or fail on the backs of good, solid logistic support. When you get people there, what are you doing with them? Where are they staying? How are we feeding them? What's their duties? How are they being briefed? That all has to be fleshed out so that when you have people arrive, you have a seamless operation.
Right. Now, we've heard references to an overall or overarching plan and sub-plans for specialized areas. So were those what you were trying to describe to us?
Absolutely. And I was speaking with people that I had confidence also were on the same page and understood that.
Right. And in terms of an overall plan or overarching plan, does that refer to something that takes you from start to finish?
Yes, sir.
What about contingencies?
Well, that's always built into your planning. When you look at public order as an example, it's filled with contingency plans. If this is the intent, if it doesn't work, this is our main action plan or direct action plan, and then there would be an alternate action plan if they have to deviate.
And command and control structure, should that be reflected in the plan
Absolutely.
itself? Why is that important?
Again, when you're developing plans for major events, the ultimate goal is to succeed. And in order to succeed, there needs to be, we're police officers, we're creatures of habits, there needs to be clear lines of communication. There needs to be clear command and control. Who is in charge? Who is responsible for this? Right down the line, because in major events, you might have a major event commander right down to a commander on the ground, all have distinct roles. But roles and responsibilities are absolutely key to get you through the event and in a successful way.
At the time you arrived on February 8th, did you know if the OPS had experienced planners like the ones you brought to Ottawa to help them develop this kind of a plan?
I was making an assumption based on my experience with OPS that in fact they did have that depth, although some of the ones that I had worked with in the past were absent and I learned I'd retired. And because as I said, the OPS have always been renowned. We've been there to support them countless times at major events. We're different organizations. We have different structures, but make no mistake about it, they were good at what they did.
Right. So you told us that on that first meeting, at that first meeting, you were shown this strategic concept of operations document, but you didn't have a copy, right? You weren't given a copy at that meeting.
There was references to it on that date. I do believe I may have been given a copy,
Okay.
but
And you said you asked for more.
we asked for more, and they indicated that there was a nod from Superintendent Patterson that any plans that were approved would be, in fact, supplied to us.
Okay, so we go to the next day, February the 9th, at 7 a.m. There's a note in your will say that you weren't getting the plans yet. And we go to page 3 of the will say. The second bullet, oops. That's right. Maybe scroll down a bit. Is this page 3? Oh, that's right. Sorry. Scroll up, please. Okay, the second bullet, discussion after the discussion around injunctions, and then stressed we needed to develop a plan. Oh, I'm sorry. I think I'm looking at the wrong page. Okay, I found it now. So go down again. I apologize. After February, the heading February the 9th, do you see the second bullet?
Yes.
And the last two sentences. Learn that everything had to go to the chief before it could be actioned or released to our team. Now, I just wanted to ask you about that. What did you mean by this?
Well, we learned very, very early in our time in Ottawa that the chief was very much engaged, and that ultimately everything that they intended to do had to be approved by him.
Who told you this?
I heard it from just about every OPS employee that I dealt with there in some way, shape, or form.
Okay.
But it was very clear to me in my dealings with their senior officers, Chris Riem, whose name is there, Rob Drummond, who was at times working with us in different aspects, Trish Ferguson. I didn't deal a whole lot during my initial days with Deputy Chief Bell, but certainly it was very, very clear that Chief Slowly was to be informed of and approving all aspects of their operation.
Now, in fairness to the former chief, you did tell us that there was some departure of senior officers from the OPS. So isn't it quite understandable that he wanted more things to go through him to ensure that important decisions are made with the benefit of his input?
I don't lay blame, sir. I look at this. This was an incredible event unfolding in his city. That was the loss of confidence that we were seeing in the media, in the police service, undoubtedly brought a lot of stress to bear. That he wanted to be looped in on everything that was going on. I can't fault him.
And you also mentioned earlier that the OPS counsel, Christian Hanaud, was present.
Yes, I did find that to be, from my experience, to be a little bizarre.
Why is that?
Well, needless to say, I've been involved in a lot of major operations over the years, and there's always consult with legal on our legal authorities and common law authorities, and the different tactics we use, make sure that we're sound within in the law. However, it was a first-time experience to have counsel actually sit through operational discussions.
But wouldn't it be helpful to have a lawyer around in case any legal questions arise?
Well, again, as it became more protracted, the event, I suppose it could be, where you would have counsel there immediately to give advice back on legal points that were being discussed. But as we proceeded, it certainly came across a little bit more than that, that she was tantamount to an approver of the action or the plan, which was very concerning. It's police operations.
Okay, That was your, that's the morning of the 9th when you were still looking for a plane and not getting it yet.
Yes.
And then around noon that day, you got to meet with the OPS team again, right?
Yes.
Where did you go?
Well, we had called for a meeting to discuss things more broadly. And it was downtown Ottawa at the Ottawa Police Station, 474 Elgin Street. It was in an upstairs boardroom. We couldn't bring all of our team. I would have liked to, but we were going to be somewhat restricted, and we were still in the pandemic, so we were mindful of all these things still going on. So we brought a smaller part of the team, including Craig Abrams, who also joined our team initially, along with Mike Francis, 2 OPP officers who had been in Ottawa working already, assisting Ottawa, one from a POU perspective, one more from a strategic command perspective. Myself, Tetral, Skinner, and Phil Liu, and there was another RCP officer, I believe his name is Charles Mason, was present with us at that meeting, along with the OPS command team and their counsel.
Okay. Well, tell us what happened at that meeting.
Well, again, we discussed 2 different documents that they provided us, their strategic concept of operations.
That was the same one that you saw yesterday?
Yeah, very similar. And yes, I believe it was the same. They're a broader overarching kind of concept of operations for the truck demonstration. And we had discussions about that. We were asking for numbers. There was a sergeant or staff sergeant LeBlanc from the Ottawa Police Service who provided us the breakdown of numbers, what they needed to sustain operations. And the number, if I'm not mistaken, was 516 FTEs or police officers to sustain operations at all the checkpoints that they needed. We had a lot of debate about that. Ultimately, there's some math issues that we came to terms with. But again, our goal is there to completely understand. We didn't just go in blank and say, what do you need? Here you go. So we had discussions about that, and then we had discussions about an overview provided to us by Superintendent Patterson of an operation at Rouleau and Sussex that they were contemplating. My notes reflect that it was scheduled for 4 with a possibility of being moved up to 11 p.m. And that night, as I noted, I brought those that I did to this meeting for a specific purpose. And, we had discussed it prior to, like, we're going there as a team, you have input to give it. We have a lot to get done here in a short period of time. Let's not hold anything back here. So Darwin Tetral asked if he could speak when he was being presented this thing. And I do appreciate when I heard the tail end of Superintendent Abrams' evidence that he mentioned the number 400. The number in my mind and in my notes was 800. He said, based on his knowledge of POU, when you look at the dynamics of this event, the number of areas that were blockaded and the work that had to be done, we would need approximately 800 POU officers to effectively dismantle this protest. But furthermore, and the key thing for me, hearing from a subject matter expert with his level of experience, is that once you start this operation, you should not stop. And their intention, as it was presented to us, was to kind of do it to use the words that were used, chunk by chunk. And there was recognition that it would be very resource intensive, a significant demand on resources to do it that way. But we didn't have significant number of resources. And the best advice and best advice I was receiving right at that meeting from our SME is that strategically, if you're going to do this appropriately, when you start your POU action, you should not stop. You need to start moving systematically through all the points to shut it down. And he suggested that we pump the brakes. Let's stop this. Let's not proceed with this operation. And ultimately, that is what happened. Although I did have conversations with the incident commander who was assigned to the operation just by happenstance.
Was that Burnett?
Paul Burnett, yes. And ultimately, that operation did not happen. But that was back to the meeting. That is inject into it. There was a lot of discussion about resources because when he raised that number, and again, the number sticks out to me because it ultimately was the number of POU approximately that we needed to successfully dismantle. So Darwin Tetro is from the National Capital Region. He lives in this area. He runs these programs nationally for public order maintenance. He is a public order person himself. And he had given a lot of thought to understanding the zones, which had been presented to the day before in terms of the checkpoints and the key areas of concern in the red zone. So, I thought, very clearly he's already put some significant insight in terms of what needs to be done to successfully shut this down. So Chief Slowly, very passionately and very concerned about the reliability of getting resources. He was very concerned that we would come through. He wanted guarantees with no caveats that if you're going to say you're going to give us X, you're going to give us X, period. No questions asked. We just stressed that we're building a plan. We have the support of our organizations to get it, what is needed to develop a plan to successfully shut this down.
All right, so you've covered a lot of grounds there. Let's try to unpack that a little bit. First, with respect to the numbers as it relates to the Rouleau Sussex operation, I just want to be clear because we heard some evidence about doubling the number, but here it's quite the opposite, isn't it? Like they were preparing for an action, planning for using 400, and you were telling us that according to the subject matter experts in your group, you're going to need 800.
No, they didn't suggest a 400. I think that was Craig Abrams' evidence that he thought that Tetro suggested you would need 400 to do it.
Oh.
In my view, and my notes reflect that Tetro said you need 800 to effectively, because when you start this POU action, when you start kinetic action in this way, you can't stop.
All right.
Which means when you look at the number of areas that needed to be, the control needed to be taken back, that was his immediate assessment. And that proved to be very accurate as our planning assumption of that day. And as we then engaged all the SMEs to develop that plan, it was exactly what was needed.
Does that go back to something we talked about earlier, planning from beginning to end and anticipate the different...
It absolutely does. Because we did have a number of times throughout my time in Ottawa where there was deviations, sudden deviations from the plan that would impact the broader plan if we were to do it. But yes, planning from end to end is always your goal. You always like to have lots of time to plan. We were planning in crisis mode and doing it as quickly as possible and trying to consider everything that needed to be considered, from the residents to victims to the cold weather, the conditions in the city of Ottawa. Everything needed to be factored into the plan.
Right. Now, you also said something about the former chief being very passionate. Now, I want to take you to your will say at page 3. Sorry, page 3 at the very bottom. So here, Chief Slowly was very passionate about the impact the demonstration was having on the city, and he was looking to break the occupations. However, they had limited ability to affect this due to baseline levels of staffing. I offered that we were there to ensure that he had what was needed to sustain operations, but needed a plan. He advised they were working on last-minute plans. Does that reflect what happened at that meeting?
It does, sir.
So let me ask you this. As I understand it, then, you were offering to help, and then you said you needed a plan. But putting this in context, because this happened on February the 9th, right? So we're already more than a week into the protest, and the commission has heard evidence how that has caused significant social impact on the residents and so on. And if the suggestion is that you need a plan before we can send resources. Isn't that problematic? Because they may not at that stage have even the resources to do the planning. So how do they get more resources?
Well, that's a very loaded question. Essentially, you need a plan to be able to communicate with police leaders. When you're asking for resources from around the province, and in this case, around the country, you need to be able to articulate what that need is and why that need exists. And in doing that, it's always about, what's my officers going to be doing when they get there? What are the logistics? What are the plan, the briefings? Everything is something that you always provide. We're in a state right now that, I learned really quickly that staffing was an issue for OPS. Staffing is an issue with just about every policing organization out there for a myriad of reasons. So as a regional commander coming into this from another region where you're going to be called upon to provide resources to supplement an operational plan, you're pulling from resources that you have available to police your communities. And oftentimes in a lot of my detachments, we're already at our base level. So when you're still, because of a crisis there, you're going to pull them only when they're needed, not to sit around waiting to know what they're going to do when they get there. Plan is absolutely critical. And it can be a concept, because we developed the concept of operations within 48 hours of being in Ottawa, a concept of operations that we ultimately use throughout the event. Mm-hmm. So you can have that and know that you're building this, and this, and we're going to need to staff those up. So let's start preparing that. But it can't just be, I need this number. You need to know what these people are going to be doing when they get there, right down to where are they staying and who's feeding them. We're human beings. You need those basics in place. None of that was in place.
Right. So let's take a look at this plan that they did show you on the 9th at this meeting. Could we call up, please, OPP 50774? So if we go to page 91, please.
Sorry, Councillor, can you repeat the page?
Page 91, please.
91, thank
Yes.
you.
So looking at the cover, does this resemble the document that you saw at that meeting on February the 9th?
Yes, sir, it does.
And if we go to the mission statement at page 96, so the mission statement simply reads, to end the unlawful elements of the Ottawa truck demonstration and restore safe and open neighborhoods and businesses. What do you think of this mission statement?
Well, it's a mission statement. It wasn't broad enough for my liking. It was just really focused and not encompassing the broader event. Okay. My experience with mission statements, safety needs to be factored in. Your officers need to know, because every officer needs to know. It's drilled into them. Every briefing, the mission for the operation is drilled into them. So safety for the residents, safety for officers, safety for the protesters, charter rights often are embedded, so you have all those considerations in a more broader mission statement.
Right. Now, we heard from Deputy Ferguson yesterday that by February the 13th, your group has collaborated with Superintendent Bernier of the OPS to come up with another plan. So can we call up that other plan? And the number is OPP 401851.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
OPP 401851. Can we see the entire front page, please? Or maybe the next page has the date. There we have it. Do you recall this as being the plan that was developed by the 13th?
Yes, sir. And that is my signature on it.
Okay. Can we go to the mission statement at page 8, please? So this mission statement reads, using an integrated response, the Ottawa Police and policing partners will keep the peace, enforce legislation, and maintain public safety for the duration of the Ottawa truck demonstration with the utmost respect to the individual's charter of rights and freedoms, with priority on community and emergency services personnel, safety, and well-being. How does this one compare with the one we saw before?
Well, it is a mission. The other one's more an objective. This is the broader mission of the entire integrated response. When it's all done, we'll have accomplished this to ensure safety for all, involve, maintain public safety for the duration, et cetera. So the mission is your very high level, your strategic direction you want to go in.
Now, you said a moment earlier that the other one, the shorter one, wasn't so much to your liking, but is it a matter of subjective preference or is it something more objective?
I would say no, it's more objective. I mean, I go back to my training in instant command, my involvement in multiple North American leader summits, presidential visits, G8, G20, First Nations issues, blockades. No, we've always been taught very early your mission needs to encompass that broader range to ensure how you're going to accomplish your goals and what you're open to accomplish.
Okay, so your group came and 4 days later, after the February 9th meeting, you have this plan developed collaboratively with the OPS. So I guess my question is, if this can be done within a number of days after your group arrived, why didn't you come earlier?
Well, that's not a question that I can really answer. I went the day that
Right.
I was asked to go. Before then, I was a commander for the Northeast region. I was alive to what was going on with the convoy because it came through my region. We had an ops plan for that. But that's a question that perhaps should be posed to somebody else.
Yes, I'm sorry. It is not a fair question to you. You were chosen to lead the project. You weren't the one who came up with the idea. But looking back, knowing what we know now about the OPS capacity to develop something like this, would you agree that it would have been very helpful for a group of experts like yours to offer assistance to the OPS, let's say, the Monday after the first weekend instead of on February 9th?
Yeah, that's a fair statement, sure.
All right. Let's talk about, now you said the February 9th plan that was presented to your group missed a lot of the key elements of a good plan. In your view, the February 13th plan, was that good enough?
It was getting there. I mean, we were, as I mentioned, when you're building a plan in crisis, you're ensuring that you are encompassing all key elements to that plan, knowing that there is literally things are going to be continuing to be built into that plan once the event is even finished. Yeah, because it's based on your concept. You know what you're going to do and how you need to resource it, but you're still continuing. The plan will continue to evolve through the duration of the event.
Right. Now, one of the things that you also told us that arose during this February 9th meeting is the former chief's request, or he was seeking some assurances. He was asking for some kind of a guarantee that the resources would arrive, right? And I take it that you disagree that that kind of guarantees could be given?
It wasn't that I disagreed that the guarantees could be given. I think we need the context of the conversation. There's debate about some misrepresentation of numbers in the media that he had with Superintendent Abrams. There was discussion, because he made it very clear, from my view, in conversations I had, that there were people in the ministry that wanted him to fail. And he had sources in the ministry that were letting him know that, people wanted him to fail. And I just assured him that, well, we're not those. We're here to help.
Well, what about the argument that to plan properly, one needs to know a little more about what kind of resources you can count on? So, for example, if the OPS were to develop a plan based on having 1,800 officers available, that plan wouldn't have been very helpful if those people are not actually coming, right?
Well, I'm going to suggest the opposite. If they had a plan, an operational plan that encompassed 1,800 officers with duties assigned in a rotating cycle, then we would have then refined likely that plan to ensure that it was sound, and we could have done that fairly quickly and started our deployment, because we actually started deploying officers in our team pretty much on day one as needs were arriving.
All right. Now, if we go back to the will say, please. Document number is OPP 50792. Page 4. Go down, please. I'm looking for the sentence. Okay, yeah. Do you see the sentence, the overall tone?
Yes.
The overall tone of this meeting was somewhat unprofessional and disrespectful. Chief Slowly was very clearly under tremendous pressure to act and was very suspicious of levels of commitments from police agencies. Tell us more why you said that.
Well, as I said, when we attended this meeting, we fully anticipated to, and I don't look for thanks, but expected that we were going to be welcomed there, that they was going to be happy that we were there. The meeting, the meeting overall, the tone, I would say, was very antagonistic. It was disrespectful. In terms of we're there to help, and he's just not trusting it. It was very clear he had confidence issues in what we were there to do.
It wasn't what you expected.
Certainly not what we expected. I think just about everyone on my team at some point in time within the minutes of leaving the meeting received apologies from other members of his command for his behavior.
Right. Now, if we scroll down on the same page a little further, we may go into the next page then. I'm looking for the sentence that starts with after the chief and his team left. Right, thank you. After the chief and his team left the room, Inspector Debbie Palmer remained with our team, and we again pressed for copies of their plans, e-versions, and she stressed the chief's comments that some aspects of their plan had not yet been approved. Yep. Tell us.
Well, I want to stress as well, notwithstanding the tone of the meeting, it did not change our resolve. Debbie Palmer was the person that was initially, the name that was initially provided to me as our go-to person. She was replaced the following morning by Chris Rielm. But that's what the chief had meant. There still was some last minute planning going on. And she said she would do her best to get it for us. In the end, we really never did receive a plan from the OPS.
Right. So at the end of this meeting on February 9th, was there any agreement between the OPS and the Integrated Planning Group on any operational plans going forward?
Well, we just committed to continue to build and work with this team and to build a plan to complement what their objectives were from their CONOPS that they provided us.
And was there any agreement about the degree of integration?
No.
Now, we expect that we may hear evidence from Mr. Slowly that to the extent his approval is required, he gave all the approval necessary on February 9th. What would you say to that?
I obviously wasn't there because I received no such information of approvals. I think it's reflective in the follow-up meetings what we have when I would call them to say, what's your status? Well, we need a meeting before we need another meeting before for me to understand that before we can move forward. So there was no implied, certainly no implied or explicit approvals for anything.
Commissioner, I saw you looking at me. Is that a sign?
If it's a good time
It is
for
a good
lunch,
time.
we'll take an hour for lunch and come back after.
Thank you.
It's very perspicacious on you, did notice. Okay, so they're going to break for lunch and we'll come back in an hour.
The commission is in recess for 1 hour. La commission est levée pour 1 heure. The commission is reconvened. La commission reprend.
Good afternoon, Commissioner.
Good afternoon. Okay, we're ready to go?
I am.
Okay, go ahead.
Chief Party, just before the lunch break, I was asking you questions about the meeting on February the 9th.
Yes, sir.
And I just want to finish that off by taking you to one more document of that meeting. This is not your notes, but someone at the OPS was also taking notes. So if I could call up document number OPS 30-14454, please. Page 138, please. So if we right. This one, right? So if we go to the bottom of the page, please. Do you see a reference from the chief that starts with, there we go. So the chief, the former chief of the OPS, Mr. Slowly, apparently asked the question, we can add the info that was provided by the RCMP, but we haven't agreed not to proceed with our plan for tonight. And then he asked, are we still separate entities, or are you folding into our incident command system? There's a notation that the OPP said, yes, we should, I think it's probably, yes, we should probably fold into the OPS command structure.
Sure.
Do you recall having that kind of exchange?
I do recall an exchange about working under their command.
Yes.
In an integrated command structure. That's kind of how it does work. But there were some clear differences of opinion, I think, in terms of what integration would look like, which I'm sure we'll get to as we go through. But I had no issues. We had some very loose talk around where we would work. The location that we were situated at had significant capacity to expand. And that also became a contentious issue because it took some time to even get us to work in the same area, which proved to add layers of difficulty to it. Eventually, it did happen, and it became quite seamless.
Right. And this is also consistent with what you've been telling us all along, that you were there to offer help, but not to take over.
We were explicitly, I was directed from my commissioner that we are not going to Ottawa to take over. The chief and the police of jurisdiction still have primacy over this event. We're there to assist them, hopefully in an integrated and unified fashion.
And this may be a question that's unrelated to the February 9th meeting, but since we've heard so much about the Hendon reports, I'm just curious, were you one of the recipients of the Hendon report at around January, February of this year?
As a regional commander, I was receiving the Hendon reports,
And were you reading them?
reading them, and oftentimes there was aspects that were just repeat, going through the changes and the change, because I knew it was internally produced by the OPP Intelligence Bureau, and attended briefings as required on significant changes that would occur.
Okay. So with that, if I could now take you to the events in the subsequent days following these, the February 9th meeting. Did work continue on February the 10th in terms of working on this plan, a new plan from the Integrated Planning Group, or making improvement to the OPS plan that you were shown on the 9th?
I appreciate that when you look at from an appearance perspective, they look like very different plans. At its core, however, the plan that we developed was a build on and support of to complement the plan that the concept that they had in place,
Right.
which was all strategically directed in the same way about ending the protests and bringing
Because-
Ottawa back to a state of normalcy.
And that makes sense because you came to offer support.
Correct.
And you asked what they had so that you could build on it.
Correct, sir.
If I could take you to the next document, OPP 404283. So if we could shrink the page so we can see the entire page, please. So this is a document that we received from the OPP. It looks like a draft document of some sort. At the bottom, it says it's prepared by the Integrated Planning Cell, RCMP, OPP, you know, those police services that you talked about earlier. I want to take you to section 3.1 of this document. So now if we can enlarge it. So this part of the document appears to be an assessment of the current situation as you found it on February the 10th, which is the date of this draft document. You see that under current, the first bullet says, not intelligence-led. Do you agree with the assessment that the OPS operation at that time was not intelligence-led?
Not in the way certainly that I would have anticipated. No, I do not believe. You know, when you look at intelligence-led policing, you're looking at your threat assessments, your risk assessments, and how you can affect some positive change using that intelligence. They were in crisis mode. And in crisis mode, I did not feel that they were using the intelligence to look at the broader event, to see about how they could dismantle this event peacefully.
And when your group was trying to build on whatever plan that you saw on the 9th, what was your objective, like in terms of incorporating any available intelligence that was available to the group?
Well, two of the key things that we did as a team is I arranged intelligence and PLT briefings for my team at the highest level. So Superintendent Morris and his entire team joined us. Inspector Marcel Baudin and a number of both, I believe, OPP and OPS PLT joined us. We wanted their perspective on the lay of the land, the current intelligence, what we know, what we don't know, what are the gaps. And likewise with the PLT in terms of how are things going, what can be improved upon, what levels of authority did they have to engage, what is the plan moving forward, is there opportunities that we can capitalize on to persuade some of the protesters to leave on their own accord, et cetera. So we received those briefings. I wanted my planners and my team, all the tacticians, I wanted them to be fully aware in that point in time what we were dealing with. We did have subsequent and additional briefings throughout from those entities just to make sure that if there's any change that we might need to pivot to adjust to those changes.
Right, and I think I saw some references in your notes that on the 10th, you got some input from Marcel Baudin Was he the person from the OPP in charge of the PLT group?
Marcel, he's got a background, he's an inspector with our Indigenous Policing Bureau, and he has a background, yes, in provincial liaison.
Right. So on the same document that's on the screen, if we go down further, we see a section with the PLT. So there we go. And Chief Pardy, you see there's not complete, I assume, because it's a draft document, but there's some information incorporated under this section. And if we scroll down slowly so that the witness can have a quick look. Now, does this capture in broad terms the kind of information you were looking for in order to inform the new approach?
It does. You know, you need to know the sentiment of the community, what the desired outcomes are. PLT do amazing work at ensuring that they understand all sides, and that's what good negotiators do, and they are just that. They are negotiators. They're trained to do what they do, to understand the perspective of all sides, to ensure that information around expectations around the law are properly communicated to all sides, and to do their best to improve and build those relationships, build that trust with people, so that what they say, they know that they can take what they say to the bank, that they're going to be following through with what they say.
Now, if I could take you back to your will say, Madam Clerk, OPP 450792. I believe it was on this day, February 10th, Chief Pardy, that one of the subject matter experts from the RCMP, Darwin Tetrode, prepared a concept of operations that was based on the information that you were gathering. So if we go to page 5 of this document, I want to go down to the bullet that starts with on the 10th of February. There we go. Do you see this bullet that tells us that Sergeant Tetro was preparing this concept of operations based on the totality of the information that you were getting from the OPS, but more importantly, intelligence that would support a systematic and safe action plan to dismantle the entire protest zone. So does this also refer to something you told us earlier about not doing things block by block?
Correct, sir.
But to have start to finish of the entire protest zone?
That's correct, sir.
If I could take you to the next document, I believe this is your notes, OPP 401792. So this is still February the 10th. And if we go to page 28, the time I'm looking for is 1925. There we go. You have a telephone call with, looks like Deputy Harkins. And there's a reference. Can we make the look at more of the page? Oh, there we go. I think go down a little bit, please. Obstacles with OPS still. Can you read this? These are your notes, right?
Obstacles with OPS still exist at the chief level. However, we're working effectively with his rank and file.
So first of all, why are you saying that there are still obstacles at the chief level?
Well, we're at this point, we still don't have their plan. It was a frequent made request to get what they had, to get access to their people, and the replies were all, we're waiting for the chief.
And the second part where it says we're working effectively with the rank and file,
Yes.
who are these rank and file?
Everyone from their command team, their strategic command, Deputy Ferguson, Chris Rayom, those that were sent to our unit to assist with the planning. We didn't have their planners embedded with us until some days later, but we were back and forth with them as well.
If we go to the next day now, so on same, these are your notes, but we go to page 32, please. And the time I'm looking for is 12:30. So there are 2 points being made here. Perhaps you can read those better.
Yeah, so the first point says we don't know what resources are deployed here before and beyond any request that we have made. We have been coordinating, and this was that bullet is in essence in reference to silos. Others are doing something. We all need to be out of those silos. If we're asking for something, you're asking for something, are we asking for the same thing? We need to break those down. It was a constant pressure. We were asking for a lot of resources here. So we needed to ensure that we were effective in our requests.
Right.
The second bullet says, anything sent to the OPPOC from the Chief's Executive Office, can we get that, please? And those were some requests that the chief had made. So can we just please get access to what requests have been made, what replies have been received? He just said he too was very frustrated. I asked if the chief's executive officer was looking after resources. He advised that he was working on getting that information for me.
Okay. Now, on that day, February the 11th, you also attended a meeting with the group, the Integrated Planning Group. That might have happened actually earlier that day. And I want to take you to the document, the minutes of that meeting. Is a document provided by the OPP, so OPP 40/1837. And I want to take you to page 5, near the top. Oh no, it says not enough memory. Maybe while, oh, there we go. Okay, so if we can go to page 5, please. Right, so there's a reference to something you said at that meeting. We're here to build a plan to support our partners, but we have no information. Can deploy when we don't know what we're deploying to. We have an OPS plan, but it does not give us enough information to deploy 500 officers without a more comprehensive plan. Intelligence picture will inform this, and so on. There's a reference to 500 officers. Tell us more about that.
Back on our February 9th meeting, I think it was Sergeant or Staff Sergeant LeBlanc from the OPS did provide us a bit of a breakdown in terms of their plan and intersections, what the numbers they needed. And that number was 516, if I'm not mistaken, from the February 9th meeting. We were trying to understand that. We later learned that it was based on a 3-shift rotation. Most organizations work on a 2-shift rotation. So the needs, again, I mentioned earlier, we corrected some of the math, but it's around that number at that time. And that was based on their concept, without duties assigned, but based on their concept of operations, we would need they would need 516 officers to maintain this on a 24/7 cycle.
I see. Now, let me take you to your will say at page 6, please. You notice that I'm taking you to lots of documents. Sometimes these contemporaneous records help to tell the story. So if we go to page 6, at 1645, so scroll down a little bit, please. So 1645, that's 4:45 p.m. Our team presented our proposed plan to senior command in the RCMP and the OPP with significant support. This plan was a detailed concept of operations for which our team would build the entire POU plan. However, it still relied heavily on inject from the OPS planning team. Now, I suppose that goes back to something you told us earlier, that you were building on what was given you, that you thought was inadequate for the purposes of resolving the protest situation. And by this time, at 4:45, you had something to present to the senior command. What was that proposed plan?
Well, it was the plan that we actually executed in the end. That concept of operations was developed at that stage, and with a POU plan that was going to be very detailed in terms of the number of resources that were going to be needed, which came to fruition, that same 800 number I mentioned earlier. We talked about everything from communication to restoring trust and confidence in the Ottawa Police, to responding to the narrative, to change the narrative, because the narrative certainly was not reflective of what was actually going on the ground, what we could see on the ground. So it was that all-encompassing concept of operation and plan to dismantle the protests effectively, start to finish.
Okay. If we go further down on this, okay, so you see the bullet that starts with Superintendent Liu and I presented the plan at a high level to her, her referring to the person in the bullet before, which is Deputy Chief Ferguson. You presented it to her, and she immediately voiced her full support. She preferred, however, that she be permitted time to present it to the chief, and we agreed to prepare and forward a slide deck for her use, which was completed, and that we would be available regardless of time to answer questions. So you're making yourself available to answer questions, but you're waiting for her to get an answer from the chief. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, so we presented it, and her response was very, very favorable, which we felt good about. And I was prepared to go to the chief myself if necessary. But based on the dynamic that we've been seeing and the feedback, we trusted her judgment, and she felt that it would be best for her to present it. It was, it was late into the evening, about 9:30-ish when we finally got a deck to her, hoping that we would get a response, probably not that night, but certainly by first thing in the morning.
Now, you may or may not know this, but we heard from Deputy Chief Ferguson yesterday that she was actually off that day.
I didn't know that.
You didn't know that?
I think I found out during the process that she was, but...
right. But she still spoke to you?
She answered our calls always. Yes.
Yeah. So that was February the 11th, late at night. And then the next day, so we're going into February the 12th now, at 11:45 a.m. on the 12th, you placed a phone call to Chief Slowly. So the two of you had a conversation. Tell us about that conversation, please.
Well, if I could, just prior to that,
yes.
I put in the salient points here, but earlier in the day, I made an outreach to see if we've gotten any response back from Chief Slowly on the plan, and whether or not it would be a good time for me to call him. And I was told it was an ill-advised time to call because he was in a meeting with, I believe he was in a meeting at the time with Bernier, Rob Bernier. So I said, well, fine. I left it till a little later. And yes, then I did make a phone call. So it was a short conversation.
Right.
But I made that call to him. And when I reflect on my notes and how quickly I was writing, it was contemporaneous in that I was writing the note as I was speaking with him. And that was the context of the conversation. Trish got the slide deck. You had an opportunity to take a look at it, your thoughts on it. His concern was around what does integration look like? Where do we fit? How does it fit in other theaters of operation and whatnot? And he really felt that a follow-up meeting would be beneficial to answer some of those questions.
Right.
So once again, we're at 12 o'clock on that date, open that we would be green-lighted to move ahead with, kind of implementing the plan that we were working on. And we then started preparing for this meeting that we ultimately had later in that day.
Right. But staying on this call for the moment, So if we look at what is said in the will say on the fourth line, I advise we were looking to work in a more integrated fashion that ensured resources were strategically placed where needed, that I had provided Deputy Chief Ferguson with that plan. He advised he wasn't sure what was agreed to yet as to how that integration was to happen. So he suggested a call. I wanted to ask you if you have specific recollection about what he said to you that day.
Well, I certainly have it from my notes. And at that time, I was using the scribe. I mean, my notes are, you can't get beyond in your notes with an event like this. I had over 400 pages of notes. You would never catch up if you weren't doing them live. I wrote my notes at the time. It's been my best tool, my 36-year career, to ensure that I capture the essence of what was said. And I'm going to suggest that that is the tone of the conversation.
Okay, so this accurately captures
Yes, it does.
the nature of the conversation. So if we go further down, oh, by the way, so at around the time that you were having this conversation with the former chief, I suppose your other members of your team were having a conversation with Superintendent Bernier.
Yes.
And what did you find out from other members of your team about what they spoke to Bernier about?
It's just that we're good to go.
Okay, so they got the message that they were good to go while you were speaking to the chief, who asked for a further meeting or briefing.
Correct. So I felt that maybe there's, well, not maybe, there was some obvious miscommunication going on. That we did actually require that meeting with the chief. I'm going to lean to the response that I got directly from Chief Slowly that a follow-up meeting was required, and that follow-up meeting did occur with a detailed overview of the plan. So I just felt that maybe Superintendent Bernier misunderstood, or it was obviously inaccurate.
Right. So if we go further down, that meeting that finally happened took place in the afternoon. So first of all, at 1400, so 2 p.m., you placed a call to Deputy Chief Bell upon learning that the former chief would like a briefing on the plan.
Yes.
And so you suggested, at Chief Party, you suggested at 3:30, right?
Yes.
And then at 3:04, you got a call from Deputy Bell, who apologized, but said that the meeting has already started, and the chief was insisting that it happen now. Is that still your recollection?
It is, sir.
And then a few minutes later, at 3:10, you and I guess you joined. When you say we, I assume it's you and the other members of your team.
The key members of our planning group, specifically, I wanted the subject matter expert to present the plan.
Yeah.
I introduced it, and then to have the subject matter expert present the plan. Phil Liu was on the call. I can't remember exactly who without looking at the meeting invites.
So I'd like to ask you what you wrote here at 1510 about the third line down, the end of the second line. The tone of the chief's comments during this meeting was very troubling, to the point that I asked if the chief wanted my team to leave the call to allow him to speak privately with his team first. He was blunt in saying no, he would get to us momentarily. What was this about?
He was having discussions that were separate and apart from our purpose to be at that meeting. And it was really direct. Heads were down. You could feel the tension over the video link in the room. And we just felt that, Phil Liu also spoke up. We just felt that perhaps it's not our time to be in this meeting, if he needed some privacy to deal with his people. And he said, no, I'll get to you next. So I'm getting to you next.
And then eventually they got to you, and your will say tells us that there was a presentation of the slides, right?
Yes.
And so if we scroll down a little bit, the last sentence of this bullet do you see key in the plan?
Yep.
Key in the plan was reducing the protesters' footprint through compliance, and that ensuring safety above everything was factored in at all stages. So it looks like when you said key, some emphasis was put on that point. Can you elaborate?
It was. I mean, this obviously was a significant event in our nation's capital. It was having a significant impact on its residents, on the policing. But we also were working hard to ensure that what our actions do help rebuild that trust and confidence in the police. It goes back to our mission of ensuring that safety is built into your mission. And that was a key component for us. We wanted to reduce the component, to the footprint of the protest zone to the utmost extent possible. When you talk to planners in major events like this, they'll say, we're not going to arrest our way out of this. We're not going to, it's going to be impossible. So you have to look to compliance and appeal to the better senses of people that are involved to get them to want to voluntarily exit the zone. And that was a key component of our plan, because we knew that from a capacity perspective, if we had to start putting bracelets on everybody there, we'd need 10,000 officers to do that. So we had to put a plan in place that was scalable, but one that we could accomplish with the resources that we intended to bring.
Mm-hmm. Now, so this is a meeting between your team and the OPS command team. Chief Slowly was obviously there. Who else do you remember was present from the OPS side?
I guess this event is a video, right? We're on video. I do believe his command team, his council was there.
Was Bernier there?
Yes, because Bernier was very vocal and spoke up in support of our plan.
Okay, so he was supportive. What about the former chief?
Oh, he was there. He was.
No, but sorry. In terms of how receptive everyone was.
Well, a few things happened during the presentation, and it speaks to what I think integration or unified command brings to the table about taking this off the shoulders of one individual and spreading it around and bringing the collective expertise to bear on the problem. But during the presentation, Darwin uttered a statement about single point of failure. And admittedly, it kind of came out that the chief was a single point of failure. It was not the intent. It was meant to show that, because Darwin was very passionate about the fact that all eyes are on you, chief. What you do, what you say, et cetera. You are the face of this for the Ottawa Police Service. We're looking to bring a plan to you so that essentially you're not going to be seen as a single point of failure. The chief responded, and understandably, he responded very, very quickly that he was not the single point of failure in this. And unless he had confidence in what his team could do, he's not going to support it or approve it. He went on a bit of a talk in that regard just to explain. I actually, on behalf of our team, apologize because it was not the intent of our being there that day. Mm-hmm. Our intent was to go there and walk away with support that we were unified and let's get this done.
So at the end of that afternoon meeting, was anything agreed on?
We still did not have an approved plan.
You did not?
There was no explicit approval of the plan that day. That did not come until, I'm sorry, this was the 11th?
This was the 12th.
That did not come until the 13th.
Okay. Now, if we go down on your will say to page 8, there is a bullet that starts with, we had discussion about integrating the command, location of CP. What's CP?
Yeah, command post or integrated command center.
Right. So this is in reference to discussion about where to set up the command post if there is to be an integrated command, right?
Yes.
And you said there's some apparent momentum being gained with a new IC. What's the IC?
Instant Commander, Rob Bernier.
Okay. So nothing was agreed as of yet on the 12th, but you were sensing apparent momentum from the new commander, who was Rob Bernier.
That's correct, sir.
And then if we go down further, I reviewed and signed off of our detailed ops plan by the end of this date, and did the RCMP. All that was required was approval by OPS. What do you mean by that?
Well, we had given them the plan, and we had hoped that they would approve it. Again, as supporters of the OPS, we weren't in a position to start actioning the plan without their approval.
Okay. So let's go to the 13th. The first bullet, we still did not have approval from Chief Slowly yet. In consult with OPP Senior Command, forge ahead with developing roles of Senior and Strategic Command and the absolute importance of these roles in support of the incident commanders. Could you explain that to us?
And that's one of the significant benefits of integrated command. So the way that we set it up, we had a seniors table, which is deputy commissioners and deputy chiefs with the Ottawa Police Service. We had our strategic command, which I then, after we went kinetic, became a member of the strategic command with the RCMP and the OPS. And then we had our incident commanders to 3 guys. So the whole goal there is to give them objectives, be a sounding board. We're able to effectively keep anything and everything political out of it. They are able to strictly focus on operations. We're able to give them feedback, report up, report down. They're never reporting and jumping over a rank. They're reporting to us, and we're updating the seniors table to ensure that they're aware of everything that's going on and the progress that we're making with their daily objectives.
Mm-hmm. So you were forging ahead at this time, even though there wasn't a final approval yet. But,
our team remained incredibly optimistic throughout this, and in spite of the adversity that we faced at times. And I'd like to say this because I think it's important to be said. There was still amazing collaboration and support to get things done. Everybody in Ottawa, from the chief down, wanted this to be over. Mm-hmm. And we were with them in that way. So there was a lot of tremendous work, and we, at no time did we just do a full stop and say, well, until we get approval, there's nothing else we can do. There was tons more that we could do. So we never stopped from day one until I left there on the 27th or 28th, whatever it was, of February.
So by 3:50 that day, it appears as though your optimism was justified because you received a call from Incident Commander Bernier, who was accompanied by the Major Critical Incident Commander Springer. And then if we go down 2 bullets, sub-bullets, you see that, yes, the plan is approved, right?
Yes.
So he approved it as the incident commander was entitled to do. And then at 6:05 p.m. that day, if we go down further, you discussed the above with Deputy Chief Ferguson. She advised that she fully agreed with Bernier's authority to sign off, that we were good to go. Was that accurate?
It's accurate. I made that call because of concerns in all partner organizations but we don't have approval from the chief yet, which is what we have been expecting all along. So that call got made to Deputy Chief Ferguson, and following that call, I forged ahead and was completely confident we're going ahead. We're moving ahead.
So with both Bernier and Ferguson confirming the authority to sign off, was that sufficient for you on the 13th?
I accepted it and moved on. And I remember telling my boss, are we certain that the chief is on board? I'm good with it. I'm moving ahead. I've got a signed document in my hands. I'm moving forward.
Right. So there was optimism as of the 13th, but as we read on in your will say, it appears that on the 14th, the next day, there were still a few more issues to iron out. So I want to take you first to, so page 9, February 14th, the bullet that starts with key issues. Do you see? So scroll up. Yeah, that's right. Key issues dealt with through the day related to OPS need to have their lawyer approve the plan, which was understood based on everything they had been going through, however, was unusual in the context of a lawyer approving an operational plan. Now, we spoke about this a little bit, and during our interview, you clarify that perhaps approval was not the best term, and you said maybe review was a better word. Could you explain that, please?
Well, I challenged this a couple of times with some other people. Can you help me out here? Can you intervene? Can you give me some better context? And I know that Chris Rayom made a call to the lawyer, and that's what came back. Well, no, I'm not approving the plan. I've been asked to review it before it's actioned. In my view, however, as much as approval may not be the right word to use, if a plan cannot be actioned before it's reviewed, then it's not approved.
Okay, so that's the first issue on the 14th.
Yes.
Another issue that you spoke about is, if we go down the page, please, the bullet that starts with furthermore. Furthermore, it was determined throughout this date that Incident Commander Bernier was being pulled away continuously to brief his chief, and this was creating frustration within our planning group, especially as it related to the POU component. I tactfully addressed this concern with the OPS. How did you tactfully address it?
I just told him we need it. He is critical, absolutely critical to this operation. He is the key decision maker, a key incident commander, and he needs his input is absolutely unequivocally required, especially as we were looking at the POU plan, which was the crux of our plan to dismantle the protests. He was absolutely vital to his success and needed. So obviously, I was the person that often went to OPS to have discussions, but throughout my time there, I would get the feedback from the different planning components that we need access to this, we need access to this, can we make this up? So I was the guy trying to work our way around any barriers that we were facing. And I know that the lead planners, who had tremendous trust and confidence in, just said, we need him. And he's being pulled away again. We need him back here, ASAP. If we're gonna put this together, his input is critical. We can't spend hours and hours developing a tactical solution that the incident commander can't support.
So those are the first two issues. There was a third issue. If we go up the page, I want to take you to the bullet that starts with while it was established. There we have it. While it was established that all key commanders would be kept in the loop, it was learned that the mayor of Ottawa had engaged with the protesters and negotiated them to all move to Wellington Street, and that OPS made some decision on action. So, and then the next bullet says that Incident Commander Bernier briefed you at around just after 6 o'clock, that due to the mayor's decision, it was a good time to take positive action on those who stayed outside of Wellington. Now, in your interview with us, you described this action plan as uncharacteristic of Bernier. Why did you say that?
It's just that he was well aware of the overarching plan that we had created for them that would systematically dismantle the protest zone. And to go back to the chunk by chunk dismantling would require additional resources, and he knew that. We challenged Bernier on the plan, but we brought the key members of the team into it, PLT, Intel, POU. They actually supported it. So it wasn't like, we don't want to do this. Okay, now we have a plan and we're going to pivot, so we need to adjust. So are we all on the same page as where we're going? And ultimately, it did not happen.
What did not happen? The action.
The action.
Right.
And I'm wrestling my brain. I do believe it relates to a resource reliability from a POU perspective. So this is the tactical portion of our operations plan, the POU. So ultimately, it did not occur either, because it was, again, it was contrary to the plan, the systematic plan that had been proposed. But again, when we put the team together, POU said, yep, we think it's doable. If it can be resourced, PLT felt that they had exhausted all that they could do with this particular group. And Intel gave us nothing that would suggest that it would be ill-advised to do so. So it's like, okay, we're good to go. Now we have to start resourcing. And I do believe it ultimately came down to a resourcing issue why it did not occur.
Right. So it would appear that all of these issues on the 14th, the first day of the supposed integration, caused you sufficient concern that the next morning, you spoke to the OPP Commissioner Carrick. Am I right?
Sure, which date?
Sorry?
The next date, you said?
The next day, yeah, February the 15th.
15th.
Let me show you a document that may help refresh your memory. OPP 401785 at page 28, please. So this appears to be a phone call that you made to Commissioner Carrick, where you raised some of these concerns and about the unified command, and you asked for his intervention. So if we go down the page, I'm looking for where it says, is this page 28? I'm looking for the reference where it says the elephant in the room.
So I reviewed those notes. Unfortunately, after retiring, my notes all went back to archives, and I just got them back yesterday.
So you remember reading that?
I remember reading this, but this is not in reference to a conversation with the commissioner. It might have been from an earlier conversation, but at that time, I was in a meeting with our broader group. I was called out for a conversation with the commissioner in relation to providing an update to the Ottawa Police Services Board. It was a brief call out from that meeting. I do, however, recall talking about my challenges.
Right.
I have made statements through this that publicly we're integrated, but in reality, we're still missing a lot. So we're truly not integrated until we reach all of these points. We are still at times working in silos. So if an action is going to happen, if the broader group who's planning for resources to support it is not aware of it, it just makes it difficult to action any type of plan.
So you might have just anticipated my question, because I was going to ask you for the context where this conversation took place and to explain this statement that you apparently made to Commissioner Carrick. The elephant in the room is, can you read that to us?
But it's not my writing, so I equally,
okay. So
if my scribe wrote
we're on
this
equal
down.
grounds here. The elephant
In the room is everything we have
done.
so far have been blocked by the OPS chief.
So these are notes that attribute things that you apparently said. Did you say this?
Conversations, yes. That we were in an intense planning meeting that morning because we got our approval the day before. Like we're good to go. We were in a significant meeting when I got called. My phone started ringing and I did not answer it after multiple times. And finally, I got the nod that the commissioner needs to speak with you ASAP. So I exit the meeting and I left my scribe at the meeting. And I went and had a separate meeting with the commissioner and 2 deputies. And it's in different notes. So when my scribe was with me, I took another notebook and I took my own notes. Okay. So there's other notes that overlap the exact same time here.
So in that context, you asked for his intervention.
I recall, because I knew that they had a relationship certainly much more significant than mine. I met Chief Slowly at a swearing in for his job and at a conference once, I believe, but I really didn't know him like the commissioner did. And I just thought, if you have any influence that you can talk with so we can move things along, please do so. And again, it's based, in fairness to Chief Slowly, it is now based on how things have gone and what I'm being told that it's, we're waiting for the chief on this, we're waiting for the chief on that, we have to wait for the chief on this. So I'm just asking, if there's something we can do to intervene, please, let's do it so we can move this thing along. Everybody on the team had a goal to get out of Ottawa as quickly as we could, but doing so safely and efficiently with a plan that would end these protests.
Right. So, so that was the morning of the 15th. As we know, later that day, the former chief resigned. And in your interview with us, you said that the implementation of the February 13th plan moved more quickly after Chief Slowly's resignation. What did you mean by that? Moving more slowly, moving more quickly.
It was just that, he resigned, and it was like, let's go. Everybody from OPS, we're ready to go, and we just fully implemented everything that was in the plan.
Okay.
And there were still barriers. I mean, we still had our issues. I don't want to think that I don't want anybody to think that it was just Chief Slowly. We had issues right throughout the deployment in Ottawa that we wrestled to the ground. But, once that happened, for example, the meeting that I was called to go to with the board also got canceled. So that freed up my time to put focus where it needed to be.
Now, in my remaining time, I hope I have another 15 minutes or so. So in my remaining time, I want to focus your attention.
A little over 17 minutes.
Oh, that's very good news indeed. Now we've been speaking about the February 13th plan, and that was the one that you and Lou and Bernie approved. And then, as I understand it, the Integrated Planning Group continued to work with the OPS to develop that plan until it was finalized on or around the 17th. Is that right?
Correct.
And between those dates, the 13th and the 17th, something happened on the 14th, which was the invocation of the Emergencies Act.
Correct.
So I want to ask you now about, can you confirm whether the final plan of February the 17th contemplate the use of any powers or any measures made available under the Emergencies Act?
Yes, it did.
Sorry?
It did. It did incorporate.
And tell me about that.
Well, like every plan, one of the things that every operational plan considers is your people. Our people are our absolute most valuable asset that we have in the operational plan, and it's important that we have information and inform them of everything. So we ensured that our officers were aware of the piece of legislation that Parliament had given us, and to use it to the best of our ability.
Now, during your interview with us in the summer, and I guess in September as well, you said the group had a lot of debate about the authorities that the Act provided, and so on. But did the police in Ottawa ended up needing the Emergencies Act to tow vehicles?
No.
Explain to us why not.
Well, if we didn't have the Emergency Act, that would imply that we couldn't tow vehicles. We tow vehicles every day for different things. We have laws under the Highway Traffic Act. We have common law authorities that we use on a regular basis. So if a vehicle is used in the commission of an offense, it's evidence, or whatever the case may be, we have various authorities to seize and or remove or tow that vehicle. So we did not need the Emergencies Act. We had legislation under the province that also assisted us when it comes to towing and removing permits and CVORs and impounding vehicles. But again, we did not explicitly need those authorities to tow a vehicle.
Mm-hmm. And you also said that the police would have managed to put an end to the protests without the Emergencies Act. They would have done so within the timeline that the cell was contemplating before the federal government declared an emergency. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Well, I think it just says what it says. Our operational plan, when we put it in place, we did not have those authorities. It did not suddenly turn us on our heels that we had to change a lot. We just added it to the plan. It helped. I'm not going to say that it was not useful. It certainly, it provided us with some authorities relating to toll, relating to perimeters, relating to preventing people from going into the red zone, et cetera. But we could have done that anyway.
So in your view, was the Emergencies Act necessary to end the protest in Ottawa?
Well, that's a loaded question. I'm a police officer. Parliament gives us legislation. We don't make legislation. They provide it to us, and we use it to the best of our abilities. They gave us a piece of legislation to use. We were thankful for it, and we used it to the best of our abilities to incorporate it in our plan.
And in your view, was there a police solution to the demonstrations?
A police solution? Yes.
Policing solution?
There was a solution, and we reached that solution. We had some help with the EMCPA, the Emergency Management Civil Protection Act regulations that we have with the province, and the Emergencies Act, but in my humble opinion, we would have reached the same solution with the plan that we had without either of those pieces of legislation.
Within around the same timeline?
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything else that you want to tell the commissioner that I haven't yet asked you?
I don't think so, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, counsel for former Chief Slowly, please.
I'm Tom Curry.
Please speak you.
Chief Pardy, the events that you became involved in the first week of February, I think the 8th,
Yes, sir.
unprecedented in your experience
Absolutely one of a kind, sir.
and unforeseen by anyone in your command in the Northeast region at the time that the convoy protesters who came through the Northeast traveled through there. Is that fair?
No, I would say that in my role and my operations superintendent who prepared an ops plan, which was largely traffic-based, but in partnership with the municipal police services that the convoy went through, the end reports, what we were hearing, we kind of felt that Ottawa was kind of in for it.
Right. And in your command at that time, did the OPP have an opportunity for you to share your conclusions or what was going on in the Northeast as the convoy came along?
Well, all of that was reported up. There was a major incident commander overseeing it as it went through Northwest region into my region. PLT was engaged heavily with the protesters. They were traveling in vehicles. For example, they split at Highway 11 and 17. The weather in the north was terrible. The heavy trucks came down 17. The smaller vehicles we felt was safer. The weather was less severe because of the lake effect with Superior. They went via Highway 11. So the convoy split there. Everything, I was not deeply involved. In fact, I was in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, arrived there 7:30, 8 p.m. at night for business the next day. Because at that stage, I had a team that looked after them and I trusted that I had a plan, the ops plan that the ops superintendent has signed off on, Intel led. I'm good to go. Just keep me informed if there's any difficulties. I was doing my regular business. I remember it distinctly because it took me 15 to 20 minutes to turn into my hotel because the convoy was coming through and with the steady stream of tractor trailers, so I couldn't get turned.
And so if I follow that, you were in the Sioux, your team is running the convoy, observing the convoy. Presumably you had squad cars, marked vehicles, unmarked vehicles.
Yes.
In the presence of the convoy as they came into and exited your region.
Yes, sir.
And passed along whatever intelligence could be gathered about the scale of the protest and those PLT interactions?
We did, but it didn't work that way, sir. I mean, this is a major event for the OPP even. So there's an instant commander in Orillia. Everything is being fed up through logs with PLT. We're seeing it, but we're not having to report it because Orillia is actually getting it.
Understood. So does Orillia, two things. Thank you for that. Two things. Northeast Region would never have, on that basis, been in contact with anybody at OPS at that stage.
No, sir.
What Northeast Region does is feeds that intelligence into Orillia, a central command. Is that true?
Yes, sir.
And then would it be, in your experience, would it be expected that if there was something to be gained from that intelligence that should be shared with a partner police service, here Ottawa,
yes,
that it would be passed along to say something troublesome your way is coming?
Yes, but I mean, I didn't learn something troublesome is coming based on them coming through my region. I learned that from the briefings that we had.
Okay, got it. And are the briefings that you had, would we understand the same information that you had if we read the Hendon reports?
Generally, yes. I mean, and occasionally we participate in the calls just to get, and largely it was my ops superintendents that would be engaged in those meetings, briefing me. You know, it was widely felt that, you know, they're going to Ottawa for the long haul here. They're going in there just because of what they were looking to accomplish. We knew nobody was going to give in to those sorts of demands, like ending the health mandates for the country and shutting down government or having people from government removed. That was just not going to be accomplished. So
It made in your view, the PLT effort to engage protesters with that agenda, well, first of all, it was unsuccessful, wasn't it?
in what way, sir?
Well, the PLT didn't negotiate the departure of protesters until the moments before the public order plan, your plan.
That's correct, sir.
Okay, got it. And at the time that they came through the Northeast region, your team would have been in touch, presumably, with the next region over, which I guess is this region, the East region.
East region, yes. I mean, in touch, again, we're one organization, so it's not like we're separate organizations here. It's pretty seamless.
Right.
The PLT, there'll be handoffs. These are people that work together. The intel, these are people that work together. So my point is, my region wouldn't continue on to here. It'd just be a handoff kind of to the next team, and my team go back to their regular business.
Understood. And you yourself personally had no contact with anyone in the Ottawa Police Service until the moment that you got a call from your deputy commissioner?
That is correct, sir.
Okay. Now, OPS for a minute, it's obvious, isn't it, that they would not have had on their own, with their own resources, a policing solution. They needed help.
That's fair.
And they have, you've told us that you've been part of providing help to the OPS over the years, as has the RCMP.
Yes, sir.
And as have other municipal police services.
That's correct.
And you've worked with that group, you told us, on other occasions. And that would be the universe of pools of resources. Would that be right?
That's fair, yes.
Assuming that we're not going to go another step into military aid to civil power through the military, just sticking with police services, it's OPP, RCMP, municipal police services, and I suppose I should add the Parliamentary Protective Service.
Yes, sir.
And the resources that they needed were the subject of estimates provided by the OPS through communications from Chief Slowly to Commissioner Carrick and to Commissioner Lucky, among others. Did you ever see the spreadsheet of the resource request that had been made to Commissioner Carrick, for example?
I don't think I saw it before my arrival there. I know we discussed it because I distinctly recall it being broken down right even down to civilian members and analysts and e-crime analysts and a whole myriad of resources. So I do recall seeing the list. We may have discussed it on that February 9th meeting. We discussed a lot of things in a short period of time. But yes, I was aware.
And the objective when a police service, and I appreciate it, it's unprecedented. So you have not seen previously a municipal police force that has been overwhelmed by protesters as this one was.
No, that's fair.
And so the main objective from the perspective now of an Ottawa police service would be to get the help it needs to restore order in the community.
Yes.
And I think you learned probably from your briefings and you observed firsthand that the situation was quite grave here in Ottawa during the time of that protest.
That's a fair statement.
There obviously residents were in distress, and the city was quite in its core quite paralyzed.
It was. I mean, I have friends in the downtown core that live in the downtown core and reported to me the devastating impact that it had on their ability just to sit and think in their own living room.
Right. And as to the police service, that when we speak about a service that is overwhelmed, the best they could do with their own resources was, I think I saw in one of your notes, was that they could maintain control of the perimeter.
Yes.
And they were not possessed of sufficient resources to mobilize any kind of operation.
Correct.
Now, when the circumstances are those circumstances, would you agree with me that the top priority for that police service is to get help?
Yes.
And to try to reach out to the policing partners, OPP, RCMP, the ones that we talked about, yes?
Yes.
And that, and to define, try the best you can to define the resources that you need.
Yes.
And you are in the, understandably, from the perspective of the Ottawa Police Service, they need to know what resources are available from other municipal services, OPP or RCMP, correct?
Yes.
Now, the resource demand at here in Ottawa was matched by demands in other communities we know, including Windsor.
That's correct, sir.
And I don't know, it probably doesn't matter, but the Windsor blockade of the Ambassador Bridge arose following the convoy protest here in Ottawa.
It did.
To your knowledge, was the OPP able to prevent that blockade, or did it try to prevent that blockade?
I mean, I was briefed, obviously, that because it was going to impact our request here in Ottawa. I can't speak to the specifics of what was attempted prior to. Sorry.
Okay, that's all. No, that's fine. But once the blockade in Windsor was established, OPP resources were required there.
As well, yes.
And at an overlapping period here with respect to Ottawa. Okay. Now, a couple of things, if I can. Just as to resources and operations, you told us about a plan that was reviewed. It didn't go ahead, but a plan that was reviewed here in Ottawa by the OPS to go block by block through the protest, and you favored a one operation, start to finish, right?
Correct.
Am I right that as it was defined, at the time it was defined, that the OPS team had devised a block-by-block strategy because that reflected the resources that they had at that time? Does that make sense?
Yes, because that's exactly how it was portrayed in that February 9th. You know, take it chunk by chunk, understanding it will be resource intensive, but
right.
one section at a time. That's fair.
And resource demands, resource requests, I think you told us that you took action when you made a resource request against what you said, I think, was a concept of plan or a concept of strategy.
Concept of operations.
Concept of operations. That's a little less than a plan. Is that fair?
That's, you know all components of what you're bringing into your plan. And you've got your SMEs now off building those components, but now we know where we're going with that concept, with that skeleton. Our concept was much more detailed than the one that they provided us.
Right.
Because it did break it down in terms of the teams that we're going to need to fulfill these concepts.
Understood. They had a concept of plan.
Yes.
You had a more detailed one.
Correct.
They had a plan. The integrated team brought a more detailed one.
Correct.
Now, a couple of quick things, if I can, then just about the turn to the plan for a second. Could I please show you a document? It's, Madam Registrar, OPS 10470, please. I think you've seen this, Chief Pardy. This is, I hope I've got it. Could you scroll down, please? There it is. So you're copied on this. So did you see the first email? It's from
Phil Liu.
Phil Liu, and I'm afraid I don't know his rank.
Superintendent.
Superintendent Liu, thank you. He writes to you and mainly to Deputy Chief Acting Ferguson. And do you see this? He says, find attached PowerPoint deck that outlines the plan we have been working on. Obviously, this plan originated with your plan, which we examined, bolstered, and strengthened. Fair?
Very fair, sir.
Okay. And that was your approach.
And this email is just to put proper context. In my evidence in chief, I mentioned we reached out to Trish Ferguson on that evening, and we followed up with the deck. This was the email attaching the slide deck to help her explain the plan to the chief.
Got it. Thank you. Just want to show you one other document just to see, please, could I, Madam Registrar, switch out to OPS, I think this one has 4 zeros, 9639. So this is 10th of February to the long list there. Mostly it's, this is your own service, and it looks like other services, other municipal services. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
And the reline, if we could just scroll down, please. As a follow-up to our earlier call, many police agencies have expressed an ability to support Ottawa Police Service with frontline boots on the ground. Our integrated planning cell composed of are mobilizing resources and support. Could I please ask any agency which has officers you can deploy to support the plan to please respond to that OPP email address with the number you have available, when available, and for how long? You sent that?
Yes, sir, I did. And this email was what we call the Big 12, the Big 12 police agencies in Ontario, with a couple additional ones that had stepped up, small agencies that had actually stepped up and were routinely supplying OPS with resources.
And you were able to send out that call for help for resource assistance on the 10th of February, prior to the finalization of your plan after you had your concept.
Absolutely. You know, from a planning perspective, when you start thinking about your concept of operations and where you're needing to take it, you need to be thinking about how you're going to resource that plan. And we knew that no one organization in the province had the capacity to resource that plan. So it's like kind of putting the bug in everybody's ear as early as possible that we're coming, we need.
Indeed. And that, when you looked back at looked at what you were dealing with when you got to Ottawa, am I right that that's the kind of thing Chief Slowly had been trying to do up until that time?
It's fair. I mean, I hadn't watched closely. I know I saw some of the media ask for a resource. Absolutely, I saw that.
Got it. Thank you. Could I show the witness, please? OPP, I think 4 zeros, 1389. Just get your help, if I could, Chief Pardy with a couple of other things. This is a situation report. Maybe, can I see page 8? I'm certain that I might have the wrong number. If that's the case, I'll take this down. But could I see page 8, please?
Counselor, there are only 5 pages in this document.
I've got the wrong one. All right. I'm going to come back to it unless I'm whisked off the stage. Can I speak for a minute about what you told us about Chief Slowly? There, no doubt is there, Chief Pardy, that Chief Slowly had the hardest job in the country during the time he was the chief during this time.
I would agree, sir.
The city was under siege and the service was under siege.
Yes, sir.
Did you know anything at all when you got there about the circumstances of Chief Slowly's tenure as the chief of police?
No, sir.
Thank you. And any difficulties that he faced here in Ottawa, either with issues that arose because of his race or issues that arose because of his inability to lead the change that he had been asked to lead?
No, sir. I was not aware.
Clearly, he had, at the time that you observed it, a very difficult relationship with his command team.
It's fair.
And others
Yes.
below the senior command. You agree, you observed during the time that you were here, or maybe even before you got here, there were political issues that were raised about Ottawa Police Service's handling of this crisis.
Yes, sir.
Both at the Ministry of the Solicitor General with some controversies about what resources were here or not, right?
Yes.
And at the level of the federal government with political leaders making statements about what was going on in their city.
That's correct.
All of which added to the complexity and challenge here for him.
Absolutely.
Did you also, I take it towards the end of your time here, you became aware that the Police Services Board and the Municipal Council had expectations of Chief Slowly and the service that they would tell them that there was a plan and indeed be briefed upon it.
Yes.
And that's how you were asked to go, and you checked in with your commissioner to see if you should.
No, I actually just flat out denied not going. And then I was asked in a follow-up from the commissioner, in light of the Morden report from G20,
Right.
The board has certain roles and responsibilities, and he felt it would be appropriate for me to make a presentation to the board in light of those key responsibilities that the board has, which I understood. But again, that could only be done with Chief Slowly's approval.
Understood. And it's unusual in your experience to brief political actors on operations plans.
To the detail that we were seeing, absolutely. Very unusual.
And so a couple of other quick things, if I can. Were you aware that a member of Chief Slowly's service, the OPS, contacted Superintendent Morris about his attendance at the briefing?
No, sir.
Without telling Chief Slowly that he was going to do that. You didn't know anything about that?
No, sir.
Were you aware as to how the senior command had divided its responsibilities here for this event? And particularly, did you know that Deputy Chief Ferguson was responsible for the plan?
Yes, I knew. I mean, she was the person that I dealt with pretty much exclusively after I arrived in Ottawa in terms of when I had contentious issues or things to deal with or questions about getting the plan approval. It was Deputy Chief Ferguson. And
that Deputy Chief Bell was responsible for the intelligence lead?
I don't know if I was aware. I certainly learned that he was, but certainly not aware. I mean, I had met Deputy Chief Bell at that initial meeting, and until he became interim chief, I don't think I had two words with him.
Got it. Thank you. I think I've now, help from my colleague, Commissioner, I've got the number I was trying to show the witness. I think it's 30 Madam Reserve, 1839, please. Bear with me, Chief Party. If this is not it, okay, here we go. February 10th, just to orient you, this is these are minutes of an integrated planning cell meeting. You talked about it, I think, earlier. Just the attendees, am I correct, just stopping there, all of the attendees are from OPP, RCMP, or other non-OPS police services?
Correct.
And it was, just scroll down if we could, to page 2. And in a little bit further, if we could, please. Okay, just stop there for a second. One of the things that you were asked by my friend Mr. Rao is whether thought had been given to taking over leading this and taking over from the police of jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. And I think you indicated that no, that was not the plan.
Well, I think for that to happen, there had to be a request from the chief, and the chief made it very clear that that wasn't going to happen.
Understood. There was some suggestion within the group on the 10th. You'll see from the RCMP to support the just stop there. Thank you. We need to slowly come back. There is suggestion from the RCMP that maybe you should take over. And you'll see it says, and I've forgotten his rank, Tetro is.
So are we in the bottom here?
Yeah, OPS saves face on this. The OPS, in its own words, is on its knees. We remove OPS from this slowly over the course of 4 to 6 or 8 shift cycles. They're exhausted. They go back to work and police the rest of the city. We're going to build a police detachment, incident police by another police service within your city, same as a terrorist plane crash, and so on. Just then scroll down. You said the OPS is listening to their tactical advisors. This is brainstorming. RCMP, I'll use instead of the word Tetro, but presents a viable plan. Is that the only plan? No. Is it an option that should be given consideration? Absolutely. I won't go through the rest of it, but at this meeting, consideration was given to thinking about replacing OPS.
So I think context is very important here.
Sure.
And the context is here starts with they're on their knees. We witness officers burn out and just getting up, walking out of meetings saying, I'm done. I can't take this anymore. They were burning out daily. We saw their senior executive, Chief Slowly. The stress was very evident on all of them. That perhaps if they focus their efforts on policing the city, we'll build a plan for the event. They're still going to be involved, but just remove them from the equation to allow them to build some strength. Because quite frankly, we saw the burnout, we saw the stress, we saw the anxiety throughout the whole event.
Is it fair to say that one of the things that may have eroded trust between the integrated planning cell team and Chief Slowly and maybe others was the idea that maybe there was a plan to replace OPS?
There was never, sir, a plan to replace OPS. And we never talked. We had lots of brainstorming sessions. You know, we'd start every meeting by saying, listen, we need everything on the table. You have an idea, let's consider it. There was nothing off limits.
Right, thank you. Page 8 of this document, please. This is just shifting gears for 1 second. Chief Party, help us if you could with the issue of Windsor. There's some references here to the demands on, just scroll down, I think, please. There we go. RCMP POU will get to Windsor tomorrow. OPP has to pivot. If Windsor is a priority, they have to pivot. Translation, or the point being made that Windsor is going to take resources away from, of course, from Ottawa?
Well, I think, again, context is everything. The support that I and my team receive never change in terms of we'll get what we need. But going back to my very first meeting with Ottawa Police, we were very clear that we're looking at this not just at the local level, we're at the provincial and the national level. And we have to keep our eyes on all that. What's happening in Coots could have an impact here. What's happening in Manitoba could have an impact here. So we, as a team, wanted to be alive to that. When the word pivot became very instrumental throughout the deployment. It was used a lot. We had to pivot daily on things because our plan needs to be able to pivot and adjust to impacts to it. So when Windsor happened, we needlessly knew that, okay, we're not going to get all that is available because Windsor is going to need some.
Got it.
And Windsor, it became not the priority, it became a priority.
Understood.
In my view. Ottawa never changed in mind. I did not say, okay, I'm going to put my focus on Windsor. Thank you very much for letting me know about Windsor. Now let's get back to what our problem is here. Our focus still remained solely Ottawa.
Understood. Scroll down a little bit. Last bullet point on this, words attributed to you. There's a last point. RCMP advises 60 hotel rooms are available in Vanier, and that's on account of the fact that 60 POU members had to go to Windsor. You had the rooms, but you didn't have the personnel because of course, for the reasons you've given, Windsor required them.
Yep.
One thing I forgot to ask you when I talked for a moment about Chief Slowly and his circumstances, I think you told us that he was unable to attend one of the meetings. He had a different commitment. Am I right that that commitment was a risk threat assessment against him personally?
Yes, sir. He and his family, as I understood it to be, not just him, his family as well. I mean, uncalled for, but there was threats against him.
Right, and that was a death threat.
Yes, sir.
There were other death threats that came to your attention. Yes, municipal politicians, presumably.
Yes.
Many others. Then could I just ask then finally the PLT. PLT, in your experience with PLT, there have had success, and they have been unable sometimes to bring protests to an end on their own without further police action.
Well, we have seen PLT used in a myriad of situations over the years. I'm a big fan of them nonetheless. I think it's obvious. We've seen them have complete success, but it depends. We use PLT and the OPP in our daily operations now. Right. In my region, for example, I had a PLT officer in every one of my detachments. Plus, I had a full-time component in addition to a designated PLT in every one of my detachments. They handle contentious issues right down to a protest as a neighbor's between two people and resolve lots. You know, resolution, if you're saying complete resolution, there's a massive process and PLT alone was able to resolve it, that's a fair statement that doesn't happen often, but they are an instrumental part of the solution to get a protest to a workable size that allows us to effectively dismantle it.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. This may be a good time for an afternoon break. I think it's, since we're going to go for certainly an hour or better. So I'll take a 15-minute break and we'll come back if that's okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
The commission is in recess for 15 minutes. La commission levée pour 15 minutes. The commission is reconvened. La commission reprend.
Okay, we're back. Are you prepared to proceed? Okay. Next, I'd like to call on the Ottawa Police Service.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Jessica Barrow, and I'm representing the Ottawa Police Service. We heard earlier in your evidence that the reason the integrated planning cell was created was to assist OPS. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you listed a few reasons that that was the case, but one of the ones that you listed was to restore the public's confidence in the police. Is that fair?
Yes.
And would you agree with me that the loss of public confidence in OPS was related, at least in part, to the public's perception of inaction by OPS?
Yes.
And that perhaps residents felt like the unlawful behavior of protesters was going unchecked by OPS?
Yes.
In response to that, however, you are not a proponent of leading with enforcement. Is that fair?
No, it's not fair.
It's not fair. Okay.
I'm a proponent to leading a measured approach, and if enforcement is a part of that, then absolutely. However, I think you're attributing that maybe to my comment that you're not going to arrest your way out of this. I could find 100 police leaders that would say the exact same thing.
Right. So I guess my point was that it's not the place you start. Is that fair?
It can be a part of. Strategic arrests are always a critical part of a lot of these types of operational plans. But that alone is not going to solve this problem.
Right. And your goal, I think you explained this earlier, the goal is to try to negotiate your way out prior to engaging in enforcement unless necessary.
The negotiation is a part of the plan. If you look at our plan in detail, there's a time when negotiations are no, and it calls for the next. There's always graduated steps of enforcement
Right.
running parallel to, not after, parallel to the negotiations and whatnot that are going on.
Fair enough. But because you are a proponent of that integrated model of negotiation and perhaps enforcement where necessary, you are a huge proponent, and I think you've mentioned this earlier, of the value of PLT. Is that fair?
Yes, they have proven their value over and over in major events over the years, and I would see no reason why we would not incorporate them in any type of operational plan of this nature.
And you were of the view at the time of your arrival in Ottawa that OPS was not providing a supportive environment for PLT.
That is correct. I mean, I should point out, I have knowledge about, obviously, OPS background. They wrote the book on this stuff. They do it well. It just wasn't happening.
Fair enough. And you, earlier in the commission hearings, we've heard about the national framework. I take it you're familiar with that.
I am.
And the national framework favors the use of PLT wherever possible to negotiate, correct?
Absolutely.
And so is it fair to say that the answer in response to the loss of public confidence wasn't necessarily to go in right away and start enforcing? Is that fair?
It could, again, be part of that measured response. It absolutely still could be part of a measured response where there's blatant offenses occurring to deal with them. Absolutely. But there's no one solution to this. Go in and enforce your way out of it. Not going to have to negotiate down the size of the footprint. Absolutely a viable option, along with a measured approach on enforcement.
Fair enough. So you would say that at the very least, any level of enforcement that was happening or ought to happen needed to happen in tandem with PLT.
Yes.
And for that reason, obviously, the operational plan that ultimately was agreed upon with Superintendent Bernier as the event commander did involve the strategic deployment of PLT as part of that, correct?
Yes.
And in fact, I believe you indicated in your witness statement that the integrated plan involved a vital PLT communication and negotiation plan. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that when you presented the cell's proposed plan to OPS, the key role of PLT was actually specifically stressed because the cell was concerned about the lack of buy-in at OPS in relation to the role of PLT. Is that fair?
It certainly wasn't being used. We were getting information that PLT were in a tent drinking coffee and not out engaging with protesters, trying to have an understanding their intentions, whether or not there was any room to negotiate to maybe move or leave the area. They were sitting in a tent drinking coffee.
So they weren't being deployed in a way that you felt was appropriate. Is that fair?
I think the standard would be. I mean, because you're putting this, that I felt this. This is a program that was in the OPP that was born out of the Upper Wash Inquiry, for example. And they have proven their weight in gold over the years in terms of the connection that they can make with and the trust that they can build with protesters or otherwise. So you can reach some common ground on some issues. If they can fix the issue or resolve the issue, that's a huge plus. But they have become a vital part. I mentioned in my cross with Mr. Slowey's counsel, we even use them now with neighbor disputes. Instead of them taking the hard hand of law enforcement laying charges on both sides, maybe we can negotiate a settlement here so that people can live in a little bit of harmony. And it works. It brings about better community safety.
And so I think part of what you're saying, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, obviously, is that in order for PLT to be effective, they have to have the autonomy to actually negotiate effectively. Is that fair?
They have the autonomy, but at the same time, they have to know the commander's intent. They have to understand what that autonomy means, what they're being given.
Right.
And in this case, early on, it is my view, based on everything that I heard, all the information that was provided to me, that they really did not have that direction nor autonomy.
Fair enough. And you were of the view, obviously, again, correct me if I'm wrong, that the reason PLT wasn't engaged in the way that you're describing in terms of its effectiveness was because that Chief Slowly didn't believe in the PLT program.
I think it went beyond maybe Chief Slowly, that others felt that it's time to get in there and do it. There's a lot of pressure on them to take action that is seen to be taken.
Fair.
PLT is action taken that nobody sees.
Right.
We
So in
see
terms
it.
of, you're talking about the optics of it.
The optics of it. And so I don't think it was just Chief Slowly. I know that in my meetings with the conversations with him, there was, he had mentioned, for example, that they didn't have this type of concept with the Toronto Police Service when he was there. And that so he was not overly familiar with it as we were. We were told that negotiations had simply failed.
Right. So it perhaps is not that he didn't believe in it. It may be that he didn't understand its
Oh,
utility.
he certainly still talked about it and understood where we're going with it. Absolutely. But it was our belief, because they were challenged by Superintendent Abrams in my meeting with them on the 9th of February about PLT, because we already had it directly from PLT that they don't have authorities, they don't have autonomy, they're not doing what they do. And we were told simply that, they're used, but it's failed.
I'm sorry, who were they told that
I
by?
think that was Superintendent Patterson that said that at that meeting.
And so ultimately, when the integrated plan was agreed upon with Superintendent Bernier, and obviously with buy-in from others at OPS, there was an agreement that PLT played an important role in the dismantling of the convoy. Is that fair?
Well, I want to be careful, because that makes it sound like we negotiated what goes into a plan.
No. Yes, fair.
What we're talking about, what we built is what I would consider in our policing world right now for major events and protests, standard practice, template
Right.
practice in terms of the engagement. So there was agreement because it's what we do, and it works. They do provide that layer of assistance to get us to where we need to be when we take kinetic action.
Okay. I want to talk very briefly about the chain of command and have you assist those of us that don't work in policing to understand how the chain of command works. So you would agree with me that police services are paramilitary organizations, is that correct?
I wish.
You wish you agreed with me?
No, I wish they were. There was a time that we absolutely did say that we were, but I think police services have largely moved away from being able to characterize themselves. When I joined the job, we were paramilitary.
would you agree with me there is a chain of command?
But there
that
is a chain of command.
Yes, okay.
That's-
So
that's
however
the-
you describe it.
That's the only similarity that
Okay.
I probably would agree with.
So
There's a chain of command.
There is a chain of command that one expects to follow, correct?
Yes.
Within a police service. So however that's described, there is a chain of command.
Yes,
And that chain of command requires that where an officer is directed or ordered by a senior officer to do something, they're required to follow the command.
that's correct.
And in fact, it is a misconduct offense under the Police Services Act not to follow a command. As
A
long as
lawful order,
A lawful
yes.
order, correct?
Yes.
And in addition to that, would you agree with me that it would be considered unprofessional to directly question the directions of one's superior in front of partner agencies?
That's a relationship thing. I mentioned earlier about my team. I had constables, civilians up to chief on my team, and they were given, I need your voice. So yeah, you have an opinion. I need you to tell me I'm wrong. So it depends on the environment and the expectations of the leader.
Fair enough. I want to talk a little bit about the integrated command. So when the integrated planning cell arrived in Ottawa, its first activities, and we've heard about this already, involved meetings with OPS to get a sense of where their plan stood. Is that fair?
Yes.
And the integrated planning cell brought with it a fairly significant amount of planning expertise.
Yes, it did.
And you indicated, with the exception of you, that these were experts in their field. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And the goal of the integrated planning cell was to work with OPS to work towards a more robust overall plan.
Yes.
And we've heard throughout your testimony, and I'll use the word criticism, but perhaps you would describe it otherwise. But would it be fair to say that there's some level of criticism of the level of integration OPS was allowing with your team at this point in time when you arrived?
I think criticism is probably fair. I ran interference a lot on that very topic to actually, as I mentioned, at one point in time, publicly, it was announced we have integrated. Behind the scenes, I'm telling my folks, but we're not there yet. Integration means they're actually working with us. We're no longer in silos. We're actually talking about the direction that we're going in. And we had obstacles, but those obstacles were not just human.
Fair enough. And we do know, though, however, that Superintendent Bernier was appointed as event commander on February 11th.
Yes.
And although perhaps not the integration level that you would have liked, there was an integrated command table after he came in, correct?
It started.
It started.
The positive
Okay.
work started. And,
Yes.
And that was born out of, I think the commission has heard reference to the NCRCC down in Orleans, Ottawa Police Headquarters. We're at the NOC. We have command posts in various different places that add to the complexities of integration. Ideally, you want your key command positions to be integrated and also have access to one another.
And ultimately, that does happen, right? Superintendent
Ultimately,
Bernier moves his group over to where you
and,
are.
And as our team worked towards securing the right position, right location at the RCP headquarters that could house the type of integrated team, we're talking well into the 100 plus that would need it on operations day. For every component of the plan, we had to have a rep there.
Right, and that takes time, obviously, to assemble
Yes.
that number of people. And one of the things that Superintendent Bernier did when he was appointed as event commander was appoint a deputy event commander. Is that right?
Correct.
And that deputy event commander was Inspector Springer,
Yes.
and he's from the OPP,
Yes. I think he's retired now.
a retired member of the OPP then, perhaps?
So
And in part of that integrated team that was assembled and evolved, I guess is what you're saying, it was specialties from all different specialty units as well as members from a variety of different agencies. Is that right?
correct.
And you felt at this time, I think you indicated, that even with Superintendent Bernier and the integrated table in place at this time, that there was at least a perceived need for Chief Slowly to approve any kind of planning. Is that fair?
It was still that perception amongst everyone, right down to my bosses calling and asking me. But as he approved it, they understood that Bernier had approved it, but they asked if he had, and that was that follow-up call I had with Trish Ferguson, and I trusted her. And when she said you're good to go, we went.
Right. And, we talked a little bit throughout this commission hearing with various witnesses about this incident command system. We know that there's multiple iterations of it, but would you agree with me that irrespective of which version we're talking about, that the chief's requirement to sign off on an operational plan is inconsistent with that model? Is that fair?
Knowledge of, but inconsistent with approval, yes.
Correct. You indicated that your team met with Deputy Chief Ferguson on the 11th to present the plan that your team had created. Is that right?
We did that over phone, I believe.
Okay, so there was a meeting of some kind,
Yes.
right? And am I correct in saying that the plan involved the creation of a unified command?
Yes,
And you indicated, I think, earlier in your testimony that Deputy Chief Ferguson was very supportive of that plan.
very, very supportive, yes.
And you also indicated that Ferguson was your primary contact with the OPS at this time.
Yes,
And so would you agree with me that that support that she indicated on February 11th was generally consistent with the level of collaboration you saw from her during your interactions with her?
yes,
In fact, in your witness statement, you referred to Deputy Chief Ferguson as a voice of reason. Is that right?
that's fair.
Okay. And you also indicated in your testimony earlier that by this time, all of the rank and file of OPS was working well with your team. Is that right?
Yes,
And on the same day of Chief Slowly's resignation, you would agree with me that Interim Chief Bell agreed with RCMP and OPP to implement a unified command. Is that correct?
that's correct.
Those are my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, call upon the government of Canada.
Good afternoon.
Yeah.
Check my time. You indicated in your, introduce myself, I'm sorry. My name's Donnery Nygaard, I'm counsel for Canada. You indicated in your evidence in chief that police services, including the OPP, tow vehicles all the time. You have the authority to do that. And I just want to make sure that I'm understanding what you're saying. You're talking about the authority to tow vehicles. That's something you have, and you didn't need the EA for that. But you don't, or you didn't, absent the EA, have the ability to compel tow truck drivers to assist with that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that the use of tow trucks, in particular heavy tow trucks, was instrumental to the plan to clear out the protest in Ottawa, correct?
Unequivocally.
And the integrated operation was not actually able to obtain the services of such tow trucks without the use of the EA, the Emergencies Act, in this situation, correct?
That's not entirely correct, no. So very early on, in fact, day one, we engaged with our OPP Traffic Services and Operational Support Command, Deputy DeMarco, her team that run all of our traffic programs. We had a gentleman by the name of Kirk Richardson. I believe he's a sergeant with the OPP. Everything tow is expertise, and he had the relationships with MTO. So they had been working tirelessly behind the scenes to build a plan, and I do know that they had some 34 rigs lined up. There were, however, some, I'm aware, that were reluctant because of some liability issues, and the Act gave that support.
Could I have document number ONT 50179, please? Now, you mentioned Kirk Richardson, that he's
Yes.
who was doing this, and he was doing the organization with the
He was working directly with MTO.
right. If we can just scroll down to the first email in the chain. So yeah, just so we can see the beginning. So this is an email on February 16th from the MTO, and there's a number of recipients, including Mr. Richardson, you can see there. And if you can see in the first bullet point there, it says there were 13 heavy tow trucks requested and support equipment, 11 tow trucks confirmed so far from 3 towing companies, and they were working on securing more. So that was the situation at, I think if we scroll back up, at 1:19 on February 16th. And then if we continue to scroll up to the next email in the chain, I think at the bottom of the first page, we'll see the time of, if you just, so now we're at 5 in the evening that same day. And there's a follow-up email. And if we can just see there that it says in that first line, good afternoon, estimate below per day based on discussions with 2 towing companies. Third towing company has dropped out. We have total 10 trucks at this time. And then you'll see that he says, we need a letter from the OPP requesting these companies to provide services and stating that the federal act cover any damage to their equipment and indemnify them from damage or other claims resulting from vehicle towed upon a police direction. And then if we go up to the final email in the chain, you'll see that it says, hi, Veronica, I've told them that the letter will come tomorrow. They will be moving tonight based on my and Steve's commitment credibility. So would you agree with me that at the end of the day, MOT was actually only able to obtain 2 towing companies and that those were only obtained if they were compelled under the Federal Emergencies Act?
Certainly, reading this, I would say that was my understanding going through that I mean, when I say tows, there's companies with multiple equipment. Was my understanding we had a significant number available, but there were holdouts that the Emergencies Act absolutely supported their engagement and to bring this to a successful conclusion.
But you'll agree with me that as far as heavy tows are concerned, this email chain makes pretty clear that they were only able to obtain these 2.
Yes, I'm fully alive to the fact that there was significant issue with tows. Our friends from Ottawa Police, in one of their preliminary plans, were going to use police officers because they could not get access to tows. They were going to use police officers that had the ability to drive those types of vehicles to remove them. So I would agree it was a significant issue.
Yes, and that the solution to that issue when it came to the heavy tow trucks was using the Emergencies Act regulations.
Certainly assisted it, yes.
Thank you. You've talked in a fair amount of detail this afternoon about the importance and the role of the PLTs in
Yes.
the work they do, particularly to shrink the footprint of a protest before enforcement action is taken. And I take it based on what you've said, you'll agree with me that that was a very important part of your plan here.
Yes.
And in fact, I think you said that if you had to go in without shrinking the footprint, you would have needed 10,000 officers to deal with everyone who was there.
Just means putting hands on everybody that's in there and 2 officers per, it just do the math. You'd need a lot more officers, yes.
And if you can't shrink the footprint, not only do you need a lot more officers, but it takes more time to
Yes.
control the situation.
It's fair, yes.
And also that there's more risk of violence or injuries when you've got a bigger crowd to control.
There's always risks. I mean, we assess those risks on a day by day, then on operations hour by hour, minute by minute. You know, when PLT is engaged, they're really good at reporting back to us whether or not they believe they've reached their limit. And in our plan, our measured approach, it's PLT that gives us that final now, what's the status? Do you have any more room to move? No, okay, they're out. We go in with positive action.
But the bigger the activity that you're trying to deal with, the more possibility there is for volatility,
Yes,
and therefore the greater chance of violence and injuries.
yes. Although I think it's important when I hear the words violence and injuries, that was a key aspect of our plan, of this integrated plan.
Yes,
To ensure that we, from start to finish, the systematic dismantling of the process is done with everything in our power to minimize injury to anybody, and we succeeded in that.
Absolutely, and you did succeed, and an important part of that was the ability of the PLTs to shrink the footprint significantly
Again,
before you
it was,
moved in.
yes, it was a good part of it.
And the PLT's ability to do that job is dependent on how persuasive they can be in convincing people to leave.
They're negotiators. You know, their role is to ensure that the protesters or those that are inside that perimeter are aware of the law, the expectations, around lawful protests. And then when they go to the point that it's no longer lawful, now you're committing criminal offenses, to inform them, negotiate. It's about building trust. Sometimes they make concessions and they're willing to do things. We have to give them the leeway to make some concessions if necessary. But if this all happens with the commanders being fully aware of what's going on with PLT, what their mandate, what autonomy they've been given, what authorities they've been given.
Yes, and one of the tools that the PLT has to convince protesters to leave is educating them on the consequences if they don't leave.
Absolutely, yes.
And presumably, the more significant those consequences, the more persuasive the PLT can be in convincing people to leave.
Yes, possibly, yes.
And in this case, when this plan was actioned and the PLTs went in to do their work to try and shrink the footprints, one of the tools that was used was a pamphlet that was handed out, correct?
I believe so, yes.
And perhaps I can just, if I can pull up OPP 401852, this is the integrated phased approached plan from February. This particular version is dated February 18th, but I understand this is just an update of the plan that was in place for at least since the 13th,
Yes.
and it was going through various iterations. And if we can go to page 5, please. It's probably actually page 6 of the document. It's page 5 on the page numbers. Yes, down towards the bottom of the page, up a little bit. Just under the bolding there, this talks about the pamphlet that was being, or it was a media release provided, but as I understand it, there was also pamphlets handed out that stated the same thing. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes.
And so there's various information that was being provided to the protesters to try and convince them to leave by the PLTs, and it's listed here. First, it mentions criminal code offenses, and if we can go to the next page. It then names a couple of consequences that, as I understand it, come out of the Ontario emergency legislation. Is that correct?
Yes.
And those consequences, in particular, the driver's license suspension and the commercial vehicle operator's registration suspension, those would only be applicable against people from Ontario, correct?
No.
So the Ontario legislation allowed you to cancel suspend the driver's license
They seized, if that was a vehicle from out of province, the plates were removed, the stickers were removed, and we would seize. And then we have those agreements with other provinces. But yes, it was my understanding on Enforcement Day, that's exactly how it was used.
So your understanding is that the Ontario legislation allowed
They're in the
you
province
to-
of,
Just let me finish the question. Allowed you to suspend the driver's license of someone from British Columbia?
who was sitting here in British Columbia. Yes, that is my understanding.
If we go down, the following bullets are all, except for the last one, measures under the federal emergency legislation,
That's
correct?
correct.
So the personal business accounts, personal or business accounts, the bringing the minor into, the fines for bringing minors into the area, and traveling to an unlawful protest site, or delivering fuel and other supplies. Those are all under the federal
Yes.
legislation, correct? And you'll agree with me that the addition of those bullet points provided more persuasive fodder for the PLTs to convince individuals to leave.
Any piece of legislation that we were given, we used to the extent that we could possibly use it. Absolutely did support it.
And as a result of those additional tools, the PLT would have been able to convince more people to leave than they otherwise may have been able to do.
Well, I don't have any metrics for their success, but the more that you can give them, absolutely.
And so that allowed you to have a smaller footprint that you were dealing with, and perhaps allowed you to get to that smaller footprint faster.
Possibly.
Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is the JCCF Democracy Fund.
Good afternoon, Mr. Commissioner.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Commissioner, the
Can you speak up or turn up the sound of it? Yeah.
yes, Mr. Commissioner, can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Thank you. Counsel for the Government of Canada just brought up a document and showed it to the witness, and it was about tow trucks. It's against the rules, but I'm wondering if you would grant me leave to show this witness a single document which we haven't provided notice for, but which may assist him and which may assist the Commission in understanding how many tow trucks may have been available.
Well, I'm not sure mechanically how we can do this.
A few questions arising of that. One is, it is a document that exists in the party database.
Yes, it is.
Okay, and are you able to provide the document ID number?
Yes, I am.
And Mr. Commissioner, obviously within your discretion, but no, the parties nor Commission Council haven't had an opportunity to review the document and see what it is. I'm not sure what it is, but one of the things that we can do is, once we know the numbers, have an opportunity to look and see what it is.
For what it's worth, Commissioner, I was going to ask for leave to introduce probably the very same document.
Okay. Well, is there any objection? Obviously, if the OPP seems to have no problem with it, I think it should just go ahead. If you can give the number so that we can then get it before the Commission.
Commissioner, can I just...
Yes.
My only comment would be if it's in relation to the questions I was asking, and because I wasn't given notice that it was going to be put to the witness, it may raise an additional question for me. I suspect I know what document it is, but I'm not entirely sure until I see it, obviously.
Well, if you want to follow up on it, you can ask at the time, and obviously I have discretion to allow that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. The document is OPP 401585. Can we just go down to the third page, the top of the third page, please? So here you can see an email, and can you just actually scroll up a little bit so we can see who the email is from? So this is an email from Rose DeMarco. Do you know her?
Yes, she is a Deputy Commissioner of Traffic Services and Operational Support with the OPP.
And it looks like this this email is being sent to somebody at the Solicitor General's office as well as the OPP Commissioner.
Yes.
And if we just scroll down a little bit, she says there are a total of 64 heavy tow companies in the province of Ontario. Do you see that?
Yes.
And I think this is what you were referring to before. She says companies who would provide service, 7, with 34 total heavy tow units.
Yes.
And if we just look down 2 lines, she says 10 companies waiting for callback from the 57 in total.
Yes.
Now, the document that we just saw from the Government of Canada was, I believe, dated February 17th, 2022. So that's some 4 days after this document.
Correct.
And it looks like perhaps in that time, the number of tow companies who are willing to provide trucks, or the number of trucks that they can provide, decreases.
It appears, yes.
And it could be the case, could it not, that the invocation of the Emergencies Act, which happened in between these two events, actually caused tow truck drivers or tow truck companies to become more reluctant to provide their services or to put conditions upon their services, such as indemnification for damages?
It is possible, but I personally don't believe that, sir. There was a reluctance very, very early with tow companies to be engaged. As I mentioned, the OPS on February 9th were unable to get any tow companies to engage, to the point that they were going to use their own people. And I do believe there's even reference to getting the military to come in and tow some vehicles for them if needed. So while it may have had an impact, I think it was an issue. And I think that issue was connected broadly to the broader issue that we were dealing with in the public domain, namely the pandemic, this massive protests, and the unwillingness of some agencies to simply be engaged.
Well, it was an issue on February the 9th, as you say. And it was still an issue on February the 13th, but there were some trucks there. There were some 34 trucks. Can you think of anything material that changed between the 13th and the 17th, other than the invocation of the Emergencies Act, which would cause fewer companies to agree to the OPP using their trucks or to providing services to the OPP?
I think the key comment that I think is appropriate for me on the tow issue is that we knew it was a contentious, our team knew it to be a contentious issue from the very start of our deployment. I was fortunate to have a team that I could just say, can you deal with this? And Kurt Richardson, MTO, and the folks in that email, right up to Deputy Commissioner DeMarco, took that off our plate. So they might be in a better position to answer that question. I simply asked for a tow plan, and can you give me people that have the capability to develop that plan? And I got a plan, and it worked.
Okay. Thank you very much. Let me change topics here for just a moment. We heard from your OPP colleague, Superintendent Patrick Morris, not long ago, that he thought some of what the media was reporting was problematic. Did you hear that evidence?
I did not hear his evidence, and I think I listened in on about 10 minutes of it as I was arrived in Ontario, looking to do some of my own prep, so I didn't spend a lot of time.
Are you aware that he testified that he read accounts of, for example, Russia being involved in the protests, and he found that to be problematic?
I think I may have read that somewhere, yes.
In your evidence today, you adopted a will say, and in that will say, you stated the media was not portraying what was on the ground. Can you tell us what your concerns were?
Well, it's just the things that were happening, and this protest group were incredibly well organized, in my opinion, and the narrative about what was happening in Ottawa was being controlled, or was one-sided. And
sorry, go ahead.
No, and that's the basis for that comment, because there was a lot of good things happening. You know, there's things that were going on within the protest group. We heard about the bouncy castles and the prayer meetings in the mornings, but we didn't hear publicly about threats to people inside the perimeter who wanted to leave and they didn't want them to leave. We didn't hear about that publicly. Things of that nature. As just but one small example of the narrative that was out there about, this is a family event. Bring your kids. There's a bouncy castle. We can have fun. Yet there were people within that red zone that wanted to leave and felt threatened and couldn't leave.
And you didn't think that was being accurately conveyed by the media?
It was not being conveyed at all, in my opinion.
What about something like what Patrick Morris testified to, that the protesters were being portrayed as extremists, and he found that to be problematic? Did you find that to be problematic as well?
I do, because I've been involved in the events in the past, from OAS summits to some of the G events, where we had a lot of extremist views. There was fringes of it with the two groups, I believe, that were around Nicholas and Waller and Rideau Sussex, maybe, were of concern, but they were not a major concern. But there's always that risk of escalation that you see from those extremist groups. It was the profile of the protester for this event was none like I've ever seen in my 36-year career. We had everything from grandparents. My first day in this assignment, I was shown a picture of 2 officers that had worked for me in the past, who were retired, who were in the crowd with the protesters. We saw children. We saw a lot of crestfallen police officers in the crowd, military, nurses. So it wasn't your normal group of people that you're dealing with. So I guess that's the point. Was there still concerns from our perspective on extremism? Absolutely. But we relied on and trusted the intelligence as it came in on that regard.
Thank you very much, sir. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Next, call on the City of Ottawa, please.
Good afternoon, Chief Superintendent. My name is Anne Tardif, and I'm one of the lawyers representing the City of Ottawa.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. If I could turn up, or ask to be turned up, OPP 401792. And sir, these are your notes. I don't know if you have a hard copy there that you'd prefer to refer to, but otherwise it'll go up on the screen.
I'll wait for the screen, sure.
And could I ask that you turn to page 3, please, of the document? Now, this is just to show you the date at the top, sir, the 8th of February, 2022. And if we could scroll down to about the middle of page 4. A little bit lower. There we go. Now, do you see there's an arrow there that has the word "from federal government" at the end of it? And I'm going to ask you if you could help me out with your handwriting for the first part of it.
Yeah, you may have to help me with my handwriting. Sorry.
Do you see it there? There's an arrow about just below the middle line of the
Yes.
page. What did you write there?
Daily siege from federal government.
Daily siege from federal government.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that,
Just
sir?
pressure.
Pressure. And was this pressure that was being placed upon the Ottawa Police Service?
The police service, the community to get this resolved.
On Ottawa as a whole to get this resolved,
Yes.
basically. And was this siege being applied just, privately in calls to the chief or to city officials, or was this occurring publicly?
Well, this is notes that I took on being briefed on my assignment.
Okay.
It might be better from those who gave me that, but that was my sense from the briefing that there was pressure around like this, we got to get this fixed.
And can you just help us out? Who provided this briefing?
It was jointly provided by Commissioner Creek, Deputy Commissioner Harkins, Mike McDonnell at Injex as it related to POU, and Craig Abrams, who was on Video Link, gave us the overview of the state that was in up to that point.
Okay. Thank you. So we can ask them about this. And I take it they were relaying this to you in your briefing because that meant that that was impacting the response in Ottawa, making things more difficult, if I can put it that way.
Yes.
Okay. If we could turn now to page 12 of the document, please. Okay, and if you could scroll to the bottom of the page, Madam Clerk. Now, we can go back if you need me to, sir. We're on February 9th at this point. If you could stop there, Madam Clerk. Do you want me to go backwards to see the date, or you're all right? Okay, let me know if you do want me to. Do you see the entry there, 10:34
Yes.
on February 9th? And it says TC, which I take it as telephone call,
Yes.
from Deputy Harkins. Is that right?
Yes.
And he's the Deputy Commissioner for Field Operations at
That's
the
correct.
OPP. It says, need to be looking at this more broadly, and there's an asterisk, Ambassador Bridge shut down.
Yes.
We could scroll to next page, please. 402, that's the highway, right?
Yes.
shut down both directions, 40 kilometers from the border by farm tractors.
Yes,
Economic impact equals $350 million per day, right? Correct?
correct.
And then it says Big Auto, and there's an arrow, 24 hours, and they shut down factories. Is that right?
To shut down factories.
Shut down factories. Okay. And this is being reported to you by Deputy Commissioner Harkins.
Correct.
Okay. And then the next, I'll skip over the next asterisk only because I think that may relate to Toronto. Is that right?
That's regarding the GTA dump for waste would be impacted of where it could go.
Because of the closure of the 402.
Yes,
Okay, so this is an impact on the Toronto garbage dump arising from the blockade at the Ambassador Bridge in Windsor.
oh, not the Ambassador, because it's Lambton County, and I'm sorry, my geography for Western Ontario is a little off.
Okay,
It may have been as a result of 402,
I see.
which is separate from,
Understood. And then it says planning to block access to impact Toronto. That's what you just told us. And then the final little note here, it says request to determine what the, and what's that next word?
current resource deployment is to the city of Ottawa.
Okay, perfect. And then if we turn over the page to page 24. And so now we're at February 10th, and I'm actually, if you could just go up to page 23, Madam Clerk, we'll just see the beginning of this. Do you see it down a bit. Do you see it 9:21?
Yes,
So this is again a telephone call with Deputy Harkins, and it says you were, I guess you and the deputy were joined later by Commissioner Creek. Is that correct?
correct.
And this is on February 10th.
Yes.
And before we get into this, I just want to back up a little bit. So we talked about the call just the day prior on February 9th, where you're alerted to the situation in Windsor, and asked about the current resource deployment to the city of Ottawa. And February 9th is the same day that you had the, I'm going to call it the meeting at Elgin Street headquarters of the Integrated Planning Group with OPS Command. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And coming out of that, you mentioned earlier in your testimony, there was an ask for staffing, and I think you said the number was 516.
Correct.
Right, and that was a maintenance ask.
Yes,
So in other words, that's the number of officers OPS needed from OPP just to maintain the current posture and traffic points, right?
yes. As I said earlier, though, there was some math problem with it. Ultimately, that number, you divide 516 by 3, I think it's 174 or 178 or something like that. Because they had been employing a 3-shift model. And as we talked it through, it was like, oh, we forgot to tell you, we actually, with the support of the Ottawa Police Association, they had reverted back to the 2-shift model, which would allow you to spread. There are inherent benefits with the 3-shift model, but with my organization coming in, it certainly would be a benefit beyond the same type of rotation, which they did. The RCP, however, remained on a 3-shift model.
Okay, so I don't think we need to get quite to the level of specificity of numbers, but if I understand it, the maintenance ask on 3 shifts was 516, that's correct?
On 3 shifts.
On 3 shifts. And if you drop it to 2 shifts, which you said you were able to do, then it's probably closer to 300. Is that about right?
I would put it in the range of 350.
Okay,
Plus.
350. In other words, it's about a third less.
It's a third less.
Okay, whatever that number amounts to, fair enough. So that's the number that comes out for maintenance of the February 9th planning meeting. But of course, the OPS was also looking for additional POU supports for their enforcement action, correct?
Absolutely.
And the decision of the OPP coming out of that planning meeting was, we will meet your maintenance ask, we'll supply what turned out to be approximately 350 officers to maintain the current posture. But at this time, we're not going to move forward with the POU ask for the reasons you've already explained relating to the planned, et cetera.
Yeah, no, that's not accurate.
That's not accurate, my
No,
fault.
we continue to deploy POU, to make plans for POU. We had, there was obviously a plan in Windsor at the Ambassador Bridge for action down there, but that did not slow us down. We knew that it was going to, of course it was going to impact, because we're drawing from the same pool,
Sure.
but it did not stop. We just realized at that stage that Because if I'm not mistaken, Darwin Tetro in that same meeting said, we need that 800. That's about all that we have in the province of Ontario. Suddenly we have to pivot. We're not going to get all we have in the province of Ontario because they're going to be used and they're going to be needed down in Windsor. Then we started our outreach to Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, and the province of Quebec.
Okay, well, in fairness, do you let me show you where I thought I saw that information, and you can perhaps correct me if I'm wrong. Can we go to page 19, please, of this document? Okay, and actually, just scroll up a little bit, please, Madam Clerk, the following page. So there's that 516 number, right? 3 shifts as documented by OPS, 516, that's the maintenance number, and we've explained that they went down to 2 shifts, so it ends up being more like 350, correct?
Yep.
And now let's scroll down, Madam Clerk. Now, I see a number of POU requests here, and if we keep scrolling down, okay, stop there. You'll see the lowest POU you get, POU by this stage, 55 plus 600. So that was their POU ask coming out of the planning meeting on the 9th, right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And can we scroll down a little bit more, Madam Clerk, please? And then, whoa, stop there. And then you'll see where it says 1635. Do you see that?
Yes.
It says briefed team. These are your notes, right, sir?
Yes.
And then it says, will staff to the maintenance plan, which has roles and responsibilities built in, continue to build our plan, right? So that's what I was referring to.
Yeah, and that's accurate. But,
Okay.
But when we talk about that in our plan and we continue to build, we're asking as we need. You know, we add PO. We were not taking action. We were not in a position. We
Right.
needed 800.
And that's what I meant earlier. For the
So
reasons you've discussed, the
Yeah.
plan's not there. Right now, you're staffing to the maintenance ask because that's what you think is needed in Ottawa right then.
And our ask will immediately go out for others now. We want others to join in. We need the SQ, we need Vancouver, we need Calgary and Edmonton to join the team because we need this number. And then the logistics around arranging all that, getting the approvals, the supports for them to be deployed were occurring.
And I understand that. But at this point, the immediate decision is to staff to the maintenance plan. Can we agree to that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, back to page 24, please, Madam Clerk. We're going to move ahead to February 10th. And we'll scroll up to up to the following page, sorry, 921. This is where we were. Telephone call with Deputy Harkins, joined later by Commissioner Creek. We'll scroll down to page 24. And if I could stop you, Madam Clerk, at the CC. Do you see that there? That's Commissioner Creek, I'm assuming, since he joined the call later.
I think so.
Okay. And it says, provincial priority has changed due to ongoing, and you'll have to help me with the next word.
Issue in Windsor.
Issue, thank you, due to ongoing issue in Windsor, both from, I think that's Intel and impact assessment.
Yes.
Okay. It is now our priority, it being Windsor, while continuing to support the RCMP/OPS in Ottawa. We may not be in position to supply Ottawa with all they need at this juncture.
Correct.
Right, and that's what Commissioner Creek told you on the morning of February 10th, correct?
Yes.
Just to put us in time, that's the Thursday, right, before the weekend, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And it's my understanding that the maintenance ask, the approximately 350 officers, was actually only fulfilled on the morning of Saturday, February 12th. Is that accurate?
You know, I'd need a lot of information in front of me to be very specific in terms of when we finally did it. We certainly made the ask. And
yeah, and no one's suggesting otherwise. So I can pull up a document. It's not a problem.
No, if you say it was reported that it took till then to do it, I believe that.
Okay.
It was a struggle. A lot of people did not want to be deployed to Ottawa.
A lot of people did. I missed the last part.
Did not want to be deployed there.
To Ottawa.
Yes. Okay. You want people to want to be there, but it was a struggle.
Right. So and the circumstances you're describing, Windsor and the reasons you've just described, that explains why the ask being made took, from February 9th to February 12th to be fulfilled by the OPP.
Yes.
Right.
And when you say OPP, and OPP and partner agencies,
of course,
I just happened to be OPP here. Okay, we're there with an integration with multiple agencies. We're all in it together.
I understand. Let me be fair to you. It took 3 days for OPP together with all of its partner agencies to fulfill the maintenance ask by OPS.
Sure. Yes.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Okay. Thank you. Next are the convoy organizers.
Good afternoon, Mr. Commissioner. Good afternoon, Chief Party. My name is Bathsheba Vandenberg, and I'm counsel representing Freedom Corp and protesters. I have a few questions for you this afternoon. I'd like to ask you about the February 9th plan referred to earlier today. It contemplated building a public order unit plan, is that right?
Yes. Oh, sorry. The February 9th plan that the Ottawa Police presented to us?
That's right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Was the first operation of that February 9th plan to clear Rideau, Sussex on Thursday, February the 10th at 6 a.m.?
It was going to be 4 a.m. with a possibility of being moved up to 11 p.m. on that date that they were telling us.
Okay. And was it Event Commander Patterson who wanted to deploy POUs as part of executing that plan?
Well, we didn't get into the weeds in terms of the numbers, but POU was part of the plan that they were going to execute, and an incident commander had been assigned on that plan.
Okay, thank you. And yesterday, Superintendent Abrams testified that the police liaison teams, PLTs, were not involved in the planning process. And he suspected that Event Commander Patterson did not communicate this plan to the PLTs. Is that right?
Yes, that's fair.
Were you aware that at the same time as the integrated cell planning, what you call the group, that the PLTs were negotiating a plan with some of the protesters to start moving trucks on February 10th from the Rideau-Sussex intersection?
I don't have independent recollection right now. There's so much that was going on. It's possible, yes.
Was the February 9th plan abandoned because there were not enough POUs?
Well, what happened, myself and Phil Liu, prior to leaving Ottawa headquarters, met with Acting Superintendent Burnett. We both knew him, and Phil had worked closely with him in the years prior. We stopped by to say hello as we were leaving the building, aware that he was being assigned the task. We didn't get into the details of it, other than he told us that he had some legal concerns that he was seeking advice on, and that from there he was going to be consulting with his POU experts.
Okay.
He consulted, and at 18:20 that day, we learned that they did consult with the broader group, and they didn't find it to be tactically sound and decided to defer.
And that was on February 10th?
I learned that on February 10th, yes.
Because notwithstanding what was...
No, sorry. I learned that on February 9th that it was shut down.
Just discussed now on February 10th, we learned that the Commissioner Carrick mentioned to you that there was a lack of availability of POU resources. And also, did RCMP Sergeant Tethrow also tell you this, that there was a lack of POU resources?
Well, we knew that, POU was going to be stretched in the province with the capacity that we had.
Are you aware that the RCMP put a freeze for 72 hours from February 10th to 13th on any POU intervention?
I need to know some greater context. I'm not sure where that's from. I don't recall it, but I'm not saying it didn't happen.
Okay, thank you. Earlier today, the mission statement of the February 13th plan was put to you, and it included a reference to the utmost respect to the individual Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Is that right?
Yes.
And part of that February 13th plan to contain a main action plan. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that the mission statement provides strategic direction to operations. Is that correct? And that the objective of the main action plan was to de-escalate and negotiate a peaceful resolution and demobilization of the Ottawa truck demonstration. Is that right? On February 14th, you continued to work on developing the February 13th plan with a group of POU SMEs. Is that correct?
Correct.
The February 17th plan referred to in your testimony, officially titled Integrated Public Order Unit Concept of Operations, is also referred to as POU Tactical Plan or Action Plan, correct?
Yes, it's a sub-plan of the master plan.
Right. And the objective of that February 17th action plan was to systematically clear and take down the protests, right?
Correct.
I put it to you that the mission of the February 17th action plan was to ensure the removal of the protesters in the area of the blockades in relation to the Freedom Convoy 2022. This will be achieved by securing, isolating, and evacuating persons within the designated blockade zones to ensure the safe detention and arrests of any participants taken into custody, ensure public and police safety. You agree that there is no reference to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in the February 17th action plan?
The mission has it. That's normally where it's contained, but what you read there, no.
Thank you. Those are all my questions, and thank you for your 36 years of service.
Thank you.
Thank you. If I could now call on the government of Saskatchewan. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Sir, my name is Mike Morris, and I'm counsel for the government of Saskatchewan. I'm just going to have a few questions for you today. Would you agree with me that the OPP, the RCMP, and the OPS did not need the Federal Emergencies Act to be invoked to set up an integrated command structure?
For the purposes of setting up an integrated command structure, no. We've done that in every major event that we've had with OPS in the past.
And I gather you'd agree that those same police forces didn't need the Federal Emergencies Act to be invoked to come up with an operational plan for removing the occupation in Ottawa, correct?
I would agree with that.
And you signed off on the operational plan that was ultimately used on February 12th on behalf of the OPP, correct?
That was a version. There were multiple versions, but that was a version, yes.
Okay. And I understand the RCMP approved that same version of the plan on February 12th as well. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And I think we've heard that the OPS approved that same version of the plan on February 13th, correct?
Correct.
And when you signed off on that plan, you were confident that it could be implemented to end the occupation, correct?
Yes.
And the February 13th plan did not contemplate any powers under the Federal Emergencies Act, correct?
Not at that time, no.
And as commander of the Integrated Planning Cell, if you had thought that such powers were needed, you would have told someone, correct?
Well, we certainly felt that we had what we needed to develop a plan to dismantle the protests with what we had.
Thank you, sir. Those are my questions.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, if I could call on the government of Alberta.
Good afternoon. My name is Mandy England, and I'm asking some questions today on behalf of the government of Alberta. Sir, you mentioned in your response to counsel for the government of Canada that some tow truck operators were reluctant due to liability issues to engage in the towing, and so the Emergencies Act was helpful in that respect. Was that correct?
That's correct.
And so would it be fair to say that there were tow truck drivers who were willing to do it? They would not have needed to be compelled to do it, but they just wanted that additional reassurance about liability?
Yes, that's fair.
Okay. Isn't it true that there are also provisions under the Ontario Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act that protect individuals who are acting in good faith and performing an order under that act from an action against them for liability in performing that duty?
I do believe so, yes.
And is it true that there's provisions under that act that provide a way for anyone whose property is damaged where an order under the act is being carried out to seek compensation from the province itself rather than from an individual like a tow truck operator who's carrying out the order?
Well, I'll be honest, now you're getting into weeds of it that I'd have to say I need to look at it to see what it
Fair
provided,
enough.
but I was looking at it and I focused mostly on the enforcement powers that it gave us.
If what I had just said was true, that there was a mechanism for that individual to have sought compensation, would you agree that between those two items, that if there was an order under the Ontario Act authorizing the tow truck drivers to provide those towing services, that those operators would be protected in the same way by the Ontario Act?
I'm not sure, because I know we had some difficulties with our earlier planning where we had a robust toll plan in place and it all fell apart because of the indemnity issue and the length of time for that indemnity, that the operators just felt that given the nature of the protests, the fear of reprisal, that they needed an extended period of an indemnity that we just couldn't provide. So
Okay.
I left the tow issue to our tow experts, but I'd have to look at the legislation and maybe even consult the lawyer looking at the legislation as to how far and how deep the indemnity of either the EMCPA or the EA provided.
That's fair. If the provisions were the same or substantially similar, though, would you agree that the Ontario legislation would have been equally helpful then in providing the assurances to tow truck operators?
If you're telling me that, then I would say it would be.
Thank you very much. Those are my questions for you today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does the OPP have any re-examination?
Excuse me.
Or any examination?
Sorry, excuse me, Mr. Commissioner. I believe before we get to the party for the witnesses, the Ottawa Coalition did have 5 minutes, and the party for the witness usually gets to go last.
I am sorry, I must have skipped them. I apologize. Mr. Champ, you have 5 minutes, and I'll even give you 6 if you need it, given my error.
I'll be 4. Good afternoon, Chief Superintendent. Thank you for joining us. My name is Paul Champ. I'm a lawyer for the Ottawa Coalition for Residents and Businesses.
Yes.
Just a few questions for you, Chief Superintendent. I've represented police officers for many years, for about 20 years, and it's been my experience that there's a lot of very strong personalities in policing. Is that fair to say?
Very fair.
Strong characters, strong leaders, and sometimes those personalities can conflict.
Yes.
And similarly, when you have these strong personalities in leadership positions, it can be kind of difficult for them to give up leadership or maybe admit they're wrong or seek assistance. Is that fair to say?
Yes and no. Sometimes it's a failure of leadership for not doing it, not asking for help.
That's fair. Where I was going to go at, wanted to ask you about, Chief Superintendent, is that you told us before about how a chief of police in Ontario can ask the Ontario Provincial Police to take over their service or assist their service in cases of emergency, correct?
Yes.
And Chief Slowly didn't do that in these circumstances.
No.
But it's also the case that under the Police Services Act, the board could ask the OPP to take over, correct? The Police Services Board?
Yes.
Or the Ontario Civilian Police Commission?
Yes.
So if they have the relevant or proper information, they could have considered that and weighed that option?
Yes, they could.
And you would agree with me that given the prevailing conditions in Ottawa at that time, the Ottawa Police simply couldn't provide adequate and effective policing services to their community.
I'd say they were stretched as it related specifically to the protests to say that they were not otherwise providing, because Ottawa is not just the downtown courser.
That's fair, absolutely. For the rest
So, you know, because we talk regularly with them about their ability to respond to their day-to-day business.
Right. But we've heard lots of evidence, and I don't think it's really in dispute, that the Ottawa Police Services simply did not have the capacity to bring this event to an end on their own. The numbers were such, the scale was such, it was recognized generally. The Ottawa Police couldn't end this on their own, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And it took an enormous amount more of police resources from elsewhere to bring an end to this, correct?
Yes.
And I'm just wondering, like, I was taking a look and reviewing the National Framework on Police Preparedness for Demonstrations and Assemblies, and there's nothing in there about what happens if the demonstration is of such a scale that the police force of jurisdiction can't manage it, and in how or in what way there could be a trigger for them to ask for another service to maybe even take over if they're having a real problem. Would you agree with me, Chief Superintendent, that more policy or protocol around that for how police services can feel comfortable reaching out to get assistance would be helpful?
It absolutely would.
Yeah, if Chief Slowly had some more guidance on that, or his strong personality, maybe he felt he was kind of getting it from all sides. I think we've heard a lot of evidence from that, felt embattled. But if there was a policy there saying, hey, at this point, that's a trigger, you should actually cede responsibility to another service, that perhaps could have helped this crisis. Would you agree?
Whether or not it's ceding responsibility to another organization, you know, I'll just back up and qualify this answer with another statement. The OPP policy, for example, when an incident exhausts the ability of the local detachment to respond, we will stand up an EOC. So we have a more coordinated response, because now we're going to be needing resources from other. So it's kind of inbred in our nature that when an event overwhelms one jurisdiction, OPP jurisdiction, and others are needed, we stand up a broader group to support, to ensure that the response, so that the locals can still focus and we can bring in supports. So I don't believe it's about policy that you would have to cede responsibility, but certainly that when you are overwhelmed, that it's time to ask and integrate with other organizations to seek their assistance to collectively bring an end to the unlawful activity.
I hear you, Chief Superintendent, but I guess just what I'm suggesting is that it's a little bit ad hoc, right? There's no real good guidance for a chief about when might be the right time to press the emergency button.
I would say there probably is no guidance or written guidance in that regard.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chief Superintendent.
Thank you. Now I will call on the OPP.
Good afternoon, sir. It's Christopher Diana, Councillor of the OPP, as you know. I'd like to maybe take a step back a little bit. You've answered a lot of questions about, the details of what happened in Ottawa. Part of the mandate of this commission, and part of what I think the commissioner may be interested in hearing about as well, is taking a look at the bigger picture. Lessons learned is part of the mandate of this commission. And you're in a unique position as a recent retiree with 36 years of experience doing this kind of public order policing and incident command to maybe give some thoughts that may be of assistance to the commissioner. And the question I wanted to ask you in particular is about an integrated or unified command. Do you believe in the value of that concept?
Absolutely. It's absolutely critical to our success in any event where it's beyond the scope of one organization.
Right. And what are some of the impediments? So if we're looking at lessons learned, what are some of the impediments going forward that the commissioner may want to consider while contemplating the evidence that he hears?
Well, we've already heard about, the personalities that exist in a lot of police leadership roles. And oftentimes that can be the impediment. They simply don't want to, they want to do this on their own. They don't need help. Or I need your help, but I want command and control of your resources. There's an organization out there that I know of that would ever say, okay, we'll send you 500 officers and just use them gently. It doesn't work that way. When you deploy 500-600 officers to another organization, they come with a command and control. If you don't integrate, you're going to be working in silos. If you don't integrate, you're not going to be communicating about the ultimate strategic objectives and goals of what you're trying to accomplish. So it's absolutely critical that leaders buy in. Leadership is actually absolutely key at all levels, in my humble opinion. If you don't have the leadership team buying in, then it's not going to work.
And I think just to maybe kind of drill down a little bit into the why. Why is a unified command a useful tool, even if there's an event in a larger city that has a large police service? Ottawa has a fairly large police service. Toronto or other large police services may benefit from this concept, but maybe you can explain why this is useful. Toronto Police Service, for example, may have a lot of resources, but why is a unified team useful for a large event?
Well, it's unified because of, the power of the human brain. The more people that you have, the more expertise you bring to bear on a problem, the more communication that you have, your solution is going to be that much more refined and appropriate. It takes, as I mentioned earlier in my evidence, it takes the weight off one pair of shoulders who is feeling the burden of this event. And I feel for Chief Slowly, the burden that he was under for this event. But bringing in an integrated command and all that it brings to bear with the resources, the subject matter expertise, can only produce a win.
Ultimately, though, it comes down to whether the police service of jurisdiction kind of buys into the concept, correct?
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay, can I just check with the Government of Canada? Are you content? There's nothing further you'd like? No? Okay, I just have a couple of questions, Chief Pardy. About, there have been words about what the operation, and it's been referred to, as I understand it, as ending the occupation, but also some people have said ending the protest. Is there a difference in your mind between the approach of saying the plan is to end the protest or end the occupation?
I certainly have used them synonymous today as one and the same. It was absolutely, in my view, an occupation, but it's often referred to as a protest. A protest can be an occupation. So they're one and the same from my view.
Okay, and in that, I just want to ask you if you could have a look at your mission statement, and we've had it referred to, and I think it's OPP 1851. And I think we might be at page 8. I think, if I'm correct. For the, go down a bit, it's up a bit. It's the mission statement I'm looking for. No, that's not the right document then.
It would be in that document, sir.
Okay, and where would it?
Maybe it's down.
Okay, maybe further down. I think it was.
I believe it's page 8.
Page 8?
If we had just gone down a little bit from where we were.
There it is. Okay. And I'm wondering here, you've put in with the utmost respect to the individual's Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And I was wondering, was there any thought about there are protesters there that may wish to protest appropriately, if I can call it, without breaking law, i.e. continue a protest legally in some manner in some place?
Yes.
Was that taken into account?
Absolutely was taken into consideration in our messaging through PLT that, you want to protest where you are now is deemed illegal. You need to leave. You want to protest, there's other venues. And this is why we put in this mission about the Charter of Rights, because there are lawful protests that you can do.
I guess that's why I was wondering about your answer of saying ending the protest and ending the occupation you took as being the same.
The same, but I guess I should qualify within that red zone that's now deemed to be an illegal occupation. If you're in there, you're breaking the law. If you're in there, you need to leave because it has been deemed illegal, what you're doing, an illegal occupation. So that meant, because we had a lot of people that our PLT interacted with that continually pleaded that, well, we're all doing everything lawful. They had this, a lot of them felt they had that plausible deniability so PLT had to educate them. Okay, it's a lawful protest to a point. Now you've reached a point, there's injunctions, there's criminal mischief going on, there's all these things that are happening. This protest, this demonstration, this occupation is now deemed unlawful and you need to leave. If they chose, and we gave people an exit strategy, if they chose, well, we'd like a protest location where our voice can be heard, that would have been facilitated by PLT.
Okay, so the PLT was seeking to shrink the footprint, but are you saying they also would facilitate a continuing legal protest in some location or in some manner?
If someone said to them, but we have a right to protest, they would have said, not here. There's other ways that you could protest, but now you're in an illegal zone to protest. And when I say facilitate, I mean, they're not going to, stop what they're doing so we can now set up a place for you to protest. But they would certainly, and we've done that. I'll use the example of G8. We set up the protest stages, everything. You want to protest? Here, you go here and protest. PLT, they'll help facilitate this because you're not getting to there.
Okay. Was there any part of the plan that provided for this aspect that you've just described, that you could continue your protest legally, just not here?
I think by that time we had exhausted all negotiation. And without reading the final plan, I would say no, because our negotiations with the protesters had reached a point that they were proving to be futile. So now enforcement action was next in that measured approach.
Are you aware of people or members of the public in media or otherwise criticizing after the fact the operation, saying they simply wished to peacefully protest?
I don't doubt that. I don't independently recall those. I didn't actually. I avoided the media and the news.
Fair enough.
So I could focus. But I don't particularly recall it, but I don't doubt it. We have to look at that with very, very carefully. I'm certain there was a lot of people in that protest zone when they realized, like, oh, they're actually telling us the truth. This is an illegal occupation now. We have to move. They skedaddled out of there because as I mentioned earlier about the profile of the protester was unlike anything we'd ever seen. There was a lot of good people in there that simply wanted their voice to be heard. We knew that. But they were mixed with a lot of danger as well inside in terms of the potential and threats of violence that existed in there. So we gave the opportunities. That was all part of the negotiations. They even looked at having alternate locations for the trucks to go so that they could stage there and we'll bus you for a protest. And that did not work out.
And so just to close that loop, do you feel the plan was adequate in terms of allowing continued protests for those who may wish it in retrospect?
At the stage where we executed this plan and went kinetic, i.e. we went hands-on with the operation, that was the option that was left available to us. With all other aspects of the plan exhausted, I do believe that we acted appropriately, professionally, and accomplished not only our mission, but all of our goals and objectives in terms of, assisting in restoring the confidence and faith in the City of Ottawa and the Ottawa Police, returning Ottawa to a relative state of normalcy for business to be able to open, and doing so without injuring people and having to arrest too many people. We know our justice, a lot of people put a lot of stock in arrest. We also know our justice system just doesn't have the ability for us to arrest and charge 3,000 people. We all know what would happen there. So I believe that we accomplished those goals and did so and returned, because very shortly thereafter, there were protests again in the City of Ottawa that were permitted and were peaceful.
Thank you. One other thing I just want to explore briefly, you spoke about PLTs, and I don't know how to put it, it was not necessarily embraced as it maybe should have been by OPS in this operation. Is that fair?
In their initial.
Yes.
The leading up.
The initial.
You know, within a day of our arrival there, we engaged with Marcel Baudin, who I believe you're going to be hearing from. We got things back on, collectively, when I say we, got it back on track with a PLT focus.
Now, a lot of the work of PLT involves, as you've talked about, negotiating, de-escalating.
Yes.
And for those who wish to bring a quick end to a protest, PLTs maybe are not viewed in the same way, or they're viewed as delaying what they wish as a result.
My personal opinion is if we took an enforcement action directly every time just to end it, we'd be sitting before another commission of inquiry and a road about a lack of a measured approach. So in my humble opinion, I would use PLT in every circumstances. They might last 10 minutes and be rendered ineffective, but we've tried. We've tried the negotiation route. We've tried the de-escalation route. It did not work before we go kinetic.
Yeah, you may be going the wrong direction. You're thinking I'm going the wrong direction. I'm not disagreeing with that.
Okay.
What I'm trying to get at is the public often is not aware of the role and importance of PLTs because they want results. Would that be fair in some cases?
I would say that's a fair statement, sir.
Okay. And I guess all I'm asking is, do you think an important component in a protest such as this is educating the public on the need for the process to be worked through, negotiation, et cetera? In other words, because we heard a lot about public pressure to close this down. And I'm just asking whether there is a role for public education.
There's a significant role. In fact, when you look, I'm sure you'll get this from Inspector Baudin, a lot of what PLT does, because it's not just with the protesters that they deal with, a lot of what they do is education as well. You know, our PLTs are active not just in the middle of a crisis. They're active all. So education is absolutely critical. The public needs to know. When we engage PLT in these events, we have PLT members who are dealing with the business association. We have PLT members dealing with the residents so that we know collectively all of the issues that we're facing. So they're not just negotiating with the protesters necessarily. They're looking at everybody that is impacted by education. I would love for every member of the public to become a PLT. One of our goals in our communication strategy was to make every uniform officer with their messaging from the constable on the street up to the Prime Minister of Canada. If we could get everybody saying the same message, we're educating the public, we will succeed. That was a stated goal right within our mission.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and thank you for your testimony. We appreciate, even though you're in retirement. Yes, I'm sorry.
My apologies. I have just a few questions. This is, for the record, Brendan Miller, counsel for the Freedom Corp, arising from your questions. I had none until some answers came out. There's just probably about 2 minutes of questions I would like to ask, if I may, sir, with respect to the evidence from the witness regarding there being no more ability to negotiate, et cetera, given that I understand that that wasn't the case, sir.
There is no provision for a re-examination. We're not going to reopen it. There will be plenty of witnesses you can question about the process as they come through, but I'm not going to reopen because you wouldn't be the only one.
Very well, sir. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, thank you for your testimony, and especially since you're retired. Appreciated. We're going to rise until Monday morning at 9:30.